Here in front of us stands the enormous Sphinx at Giza, a stone monument that has a lion's body and a face like a god's. For hundreds of years, people have told us that Pharaoh Khafre made it by carving stone, creating a monument during Egypt's fourth dynasty roughly 4,500 years back to protect the Giza pyramids. This explanation seems tidy, finished, and makes us feel safe. School books talk about ramps, tools made of copper, and workers pulling blocks of limestone while following the pharaoh's holy orders. This story celebrates human cleverness and shows a society at its strongest point. However, what if this whole story isn't true? What if the Sphinx exists from a time much earlier than the pharaohs, even older than Egypt as a country, left behind from a forgotten era when our world looked completely different? During that time, rain poured down on a Sahara desert that was green, and people from a civilization whose name we never learned left their legacy carved in stone. Greetings, truth seekers, to mystery history designed for sleeping. Many thousands of years back, before the pyramids were constructed, before the Nile River became Egypt's main source of life, this area was filled with grasslands, lakes, and heavy seasonal rains. The Sahara wasn't an empty wasteland, but instead a place where life began, where people lived in communities, where ancient rock paintings showed groups of antelope and rivers that don't exist anymore. This period was called the African Humid Period, a time spanning from 7,000 to 4,000 BCE, when North Africa's weather supported a world we find hard to imagine today. During this ancient era, some people believe the Sphinx wasn't carved by Egyptians, but by people whose identity has been wiped away by time completely. During the early years of the 1990s, a scientist who studied rocks named Robert Schoch walked up to the Sphinx and noticed something that transformed everything. He hadn't been trained as an Egyptologist who memorizes the approved timeline of how pharaohs built things. He was a person who studied stone, someone who understood Earth's past by examining its marks. What he observed on the Sphinx enclosure's walls wasn't the kind of sharp horizontal damage from wind and sand that has worn down the nearby pyramids over thousands of years. What he found instead were deep vertical grooves, patterns that looked like waves, and corners that had been smoothed down, all telling a completely different story. These marks came from water, not from brief desert storms, but from continuous, powerful rainfall, the type that runs down rock surfaces for hundreds of years, cutting grooves and changing stone in ways that only a climate with lots of moisture can do. For Schoch, the proof was impossible to mistake. The Sphinx had survived a massive flood that stopped thousands of years before any pharaoh ever ruled with a royal staff. This finding creates a crack in Egyptology's basic foundation. If the Sphinx displays evidence of water damage from a period when Egypt had green landscapes, this could mean the monument comes from before the civilization we say built it. The most recent time the Giza Plateau experienced that kind of heavy rain was more than 7,000 years in the past, way before the Old Kingdom existed, before Egypt became one country under Menes, before the picture writing that tells us who was in charge and what they constructed. If Schoch's theory is correct, the Sphinx might be 10,000 years old or possibly even older, a quiet observer of a part of human history that we never wrote down. However, this creates a question that rings through time. Which people carved this stone guardian, and how did their history disappear? The accepted story strongly claims the Sphinx was constructed by Khafre, the pharaoh who built Giza's second pyramid. People connect his name to the monument because of a broken statue discovered close by and the belief that the Sphinx's face looks like his. But there's no carved writing, no royal symbol in an oval shape, no clear written proof connecting Khafre to the Sphinx. The facts we have are based on circumstances, a story created from being nearby instead of from actual proof. When you examine it more carefully, that story develops bigger problems. The temple buildings next to the Sphinx, constructed from limestone blocks taken from its surrounding area, don't have any of that same water damage. Their surfaces stay sharp, have clear angles, and show no touch from the rains that shaped the Sphinx's walls. This indicates the temples were built at a later time using stone cut from the Sphinx's own structure, as if the monument already existed there when the pharaohs came to say it was theirs. Let's think carefully about that idea. The Sphinx, a huge figure carved straight from the ground's bedrock, needed an engineering project of incredible size. Workers had to remove more than 1,000 tons of limestone to create its shape, a job that required advanced planning, proper tools, and many laborers. The people who built it worked following the stone's natural layers, following its patterns with accuracy that matches today's construction methods. But unlike every other monument throughout Egypt, the Sphinx doesn't have any name, any dedication, or any statement of who owns it. Pharaohs weren't famous for being humble about their accomplishments. Their temples, statues, and burial places were covered with royal symbols, songs of praise, and pictures of divine approval. To discover a monument this enormous aligned with perfect accuracy to the sunrise on the equinox, without a single picture word praising whoever made it isn't just confusing. It seems impossible to believe. Now think about what this means. If the Sphinx comes from before the pharaohs existed, it questions everything we understand about how human civilization grew and developed. The timeline people accept says that building huge monuments started when the Old Kingdom began around 3100 BCE. However, a Sphinx carved 7,000 years ago would belong to an age we call prehistoric, a time when humans supposedly lived in basic settlements, not changing entire landscapes with complicated engineering. This isn't only about figuring out when one monument was built. It's about completely rewriting the story of who humans were and what abilities we had. Is it possible there existed a civilization that history forgot that had understanding we're only starting to learn again? A civilization that knew about geology, astronomy, and engineering in ways that go against what we assume about ancient times. This concept isn't as ridiculous as it might sound. Throughout the entire world, other old sites suggest a forgotten time period. Look at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. A group of stone pillars put up 12,000 years back before writing was invented, before farming started as we understand it. The builders moved stones that weighed as much as 20 tons, carved detailed designs, and positioned their structures to match with events in the sky. Or think about the underwater ruins at Yonaguni near Japan, with their exact angles and flat terraces from a time when ocean levels were much lower, maybe 10,000 years back. These locations, just like the Sphinx, don't match the organized progression of history we learned in school. They point to a world where complicated knowledge existed much earlier than we believed it could, only to get lost in some terrible disaster, a flood, a change in climate, a breakdown that covered their accomplishments under sand and ocean water. Then there's the story of Atlantis told by Plato, the Greek philosopher, more than 2,300 years ago. He talked about an advanced civilization that thrived 9,000 years before he lived. A society of builders and sailors that vanished in just one day and night of destruction. Could the Sphinx be what's left from that kind of culture, a guardian left behind to mark a holy location? People have rejected the idea as just a myth, but myths frequently contain pieces of real truth. The African humid period ended suddenly around 4000 BCE when the Sahara changed from a green paradise into a desert wasteland. Human populations moved to the Nile River where Egypt would eventually grow. What if someone carved the Sphinx before that change happened? A monument to honor a world that was already disappearing, its creators understanding their time was coming to an end. This leads us to a more troubling question. Why don't we know what they were called? Why doesn't the Sphinx tell us anything? Why are its beginnings hidden in a fog of being forgotten? The ancient Egyptians were obsessed with keeping records, drawing maps of their kings, their gods, their victories in picture writing that has lasted for thousands of years. Still, the Sphinx, the most puzzling monument in their territory, has no story, no builder, no reason written on it. This quietness feels like it was done on purpose, as if somebody or something wanted its real truth to stay hidden. The damage patterns from erosion tell one story, but the lack of any words tells a different one. It seems like the builders picked being anonymous instead of being remembered forever, making a monument that would last not by being famous, but by staying mysterious. This is where the quiet rumors get stronger. Some people say the Sphinx protects a secret much bigger than just its age. The psychic Edgar case during the early 1900s talked about a hall of records hidden underneath the Sphinx, a room holding the knowledge of a lost civilization with texts, tools, and maybe even technology that could completely change how we understand the past. Ground-penetrating radar during the 1980s and 2000s found unusual things beneath the monument, empty spaces and hollow areas that suggest structures made by humans. However, when scientists tried to explore deeper, they faced locked gates and official rejections. Egyptian authorities have repeatedly said these discoveries are just natural cracks or don't matter. But why keep it secret? Why refuse to investigate what sits beneath the Sphinx's paws? This is the point where the sand starts to move. The Sphinx's story isn't just about stone and rain. It's about what information we're permitted to know and what has been covered up not by time but by intentional choice. The water damage, the missing inscriptions, the strange readings beneath the plateau, they all point toward a truth that threatens the basic foundation of history as we understand it. The Sphinx doesn't just exist as a monument. It exists as a question, one that has been waiting thousands of years for someone to ask it. Who constructed it? Why did they hide what it's for? And what aren't we supposed to discover? We're only at the start, and Giza's shadows have much more to show us. As we move deeper into the night, keep the image of the Sphinx in your thoughts. A creature made of stone, half lion, half god, staring at the horizon where the sun comes up every morning. It has observed empires grow and collapse, watched the rains turn into dust, and maintained its quietness through all of it. However, silence isn't the same as being empty. It's a force, a period of waiting, a test for those brave enough to pay attention. The Sphinx isn't just a monument. It's a warning that history isn't what we believe, that the past contains secrets we've been taught to overlook, and that the truth might be much older, much stranger than we're prepared to believe. So, let's keep questioning. Let's keep searching. Because the Sphinx's story is only the first step into a maze where memory itself has been covered up, waiting for us to discover it once more. On our previous journey, we stood facing the Great Sphinx, its walls marked by water damage, suggesting a period before the pharaohs, a time when rain fell on a green Sahara and an unknown civilization carved a guardian to last longer than their world. This evening, we turn our attention to the Great Pyramid itself, the massive centerpiece of the Giza Plateau, a monument that communicates not through picture writing, but through numbers so exact, so worldwide that they challenge everything we think about ancient times. What if the Great Pyramid isn't a burial place, not a temple, but a machine? A machine made not of gears or electronic circuits, but of geometry and time, constructed to save knowledge through the destruction of civilizations. Shut your eyes, let the desert wind disappear, and pay attention as the stones share their secrets. The Great Pyramid at Giza rises more than 140 meters high. Its 2.3 million blocks of limestone prove a vision we can hardly understand. Each block that weighs between 2.5 and 15 tons got cut, transported, and positioned with an accuracy that goes beyond the tools we credit to ancient Egypt like copper chisels, wooden sleds, and human effort. The base is leveled to within 2.1 centimeters throughout its enormous 230-meter width, pointed toward true north with an exactness of 0.05 degrees. Today's engineers who have lasers and GPS have difficulty matching such accomplishments. Still, we're told this was the work of a 4th dynasty pharaoh, Khufu, around 2580 BCE, a king whose name shows up only one time in the whole structure, written in red paint on a hidden beam. However, the pyramid's real language isn't in its quietness or its one royal symbol. It's in its measurements, its proportions, its positioning, a code written in stone that tells of knowledge far past what we think the Egyptians had. Let's start with the numbers. The Great Pyramid's base measures roughly 230.4 meters on every side, making a nearly perfect square. Its starting height before the top stone went missing was 146.6 meters. Divide the distance around the outside, 921.6 meters, by the height and you get 6.2857, a number so near to 2 pi that the difference is smaller than 0.1%. This isn't a rough guess, the type you could stumble upon through testing and making mistakes. This is planned, exact, a mathematical constant built into the pyramid's actual shape. Pi, which is the ratio of a circle's measurement around to its measurement across, wasn't officially defined until hundreds of years afterward. Still, here it sits, carved in limestone on a size that makes human ambition look tiny. However, the code goes even deeper. The pyramid's slope, about 51.84 degrees, contains another worldwide constant, the golden ratio, phi, roughly 1.618. When you compare the half-base length to the height, the measurements match with phi, a number respected across cultures for its beauty and mathematical balance. These aren't accidents. The chance of a single structure containing both pi and phi by pure luck is incredibly tiny. But the Great Pyramid doesn't finish there. Its measurements appear to know the Earth itself. Multiply the height, 146.6 meters by 43,200, and you get 6,356,400 meters, a surprisingly close match to Earth's polar radius with 99.7% accuracy. Multiply the base's distance around, 921.6 meters by that same number, and you get 39,931,200 meters, a figure that comes close to Earth's equatorial distance around with similar exactness. Why 43,200? It's not random. It's connected to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that finishes a cycle every 25,920 years. Divide that cycle by 600 and you get 43,200, a sizing factor that connects the pyramid's measurements to the planet's dimensions. This points to a knowledge of astronomy and geometry that should have been impossible for a civilization without telescopes, calculus, or an idea of a round Earth. The pyramid's inside structure makes the mystery deeper. The so-called King's Chamber, a granite box at the monument's center, is constructed with blocks dragged from quarries hundreds of miles away, fitted with accuracy that today's stone workers admire. The chamber's sound properties are remarkable. Sounds bounce back in ways that suggest intentional design, as if the space was meant to make certain frequencies louder. The air passages, narrow channels going from the chamber to the pyramids outside, are positioned with heavenly accuracy. The southern passage aims at Orion's belt, the northern one at the pole star, not how they look today, but how they were positioned around 2450 BCE. This isn't basic star watching. Reaching such positioning needs instruments able to measure tiny fractions of degrees, an understanding of how stars move, and the ability to figure out three-dimensional connections between Earth and the sky. No proof of such tools or understanding exists in Egyptian records. Still, the pyramid stands as evidence that someone, somewhere had it. Who could have understood these things? The Egyptians during the 4th dynasty were experts at useful mathematics, geometry for measuring land, arithmetic for business. However, nothing in their remaining texts indicates they understood pi, phi, or planetary dimensions. Their astronomy was advanced, connected to the Nile's floods and religious ceremonies, but not to the level of figuring out precession or star positioning across thousands of years. The Great Pyramid feels like a singularity, a spike in knowledge that showed up fully formed and was never copied. Pyramids built later, like those of Khufu and Menkaure, don't have the same mathematical exactness. Their slopes are less refined, their positioning approximate, their construction frequently compromised. The bent pyramid of Sneferu, constructed just decades before, had to be changed during construction to prevent falling down. If the Great Pyramid was the peak of hundreds of years of skill, why did that skill disappear so fast? Why do monuments built after show a decline instead of an improvement? This takes us to a stronger theory. What if the Great Pyramid wasn't constructed by the Egyptians, but received by them? What if it was a leftover from a lost civilization, one that put its understanding of the universe in stone to survive a disaster they knew was approaching? The concept of a time machine isn't science fiction here, a comparison for a structure designed to save knowledge through the destruction of empires, the disappearance of languages, the forgetting of whole worlds. Mathematical constants like pi and phi are universal, staying the same no matter what culture or time period. Unlike picture writing, which needs a special stone to translate, or papyrus, which breaks apart to dust, geometry lasts. By putting these proportions in the pyramid's dimensions, its builders made a message that could be understood by any civilization advanced enough to measure it. This idea of saving knowledge isn't special to Giza. Throughout the Old World, we discover echoes of similar purpose. Stonehenge in England, constructed around 2500 BCE, lines up with the longest and shortest days, putting astronomical cycles in its stones. The huge three-stone structures at Baalbek in Lebanon, some weighing more than 800 tons, point to engineering abilities that resist explanation. The underwater structures at Yonaguni, possibly 10,000 years old, suggest a culture that disappeared under rising ocean water. These locations, like the Great Pyramid, appear designed to last longer than their creators, to communicate across thousands of years, not through words, but through size and accuracy. The Great Pyramid, with its mathematical codes, could be a time container, a storage place of truths meant for a future that had forgotten how to calculate them. However, why hide such knowledge where everyone can see it? Why construct a monument so huge, so lasting, but leave no name, no writing, no statement of glory? Egyptian pharaohs were not quiet about their accomplishments. Their tombs, temples, and statues are filled with royal symbols, songs, and pictures of divine approval. The Great Pyramid, in contrast, is silent. Its only marking, a faint royal symbol of Khufu's name found in an unreachable chamber above the king's chamber, feels like an afterthought, a quiet sound rather than a loud announcement. Some people even question if it's real, pointing out that the explorer Howard Vyse, who found it in 1837, was under pressure to connect the pyramid to a pharaoh. However, even if it's genuine, a single name doesn't explain the lack of everything else. No prayers, no maps of the afterlife, no rituals carved into the stone. This quietness points to a purpose past Egyptian religion, past the requirements of a single king. Here is the point where the shadows get darker. Some researchers suggest that the Great Pyramid was never a burial place at all. No mummy, no burial objects, no lid for the stone container, just an empty granite box in the king's chamber, too simple to be a pharaoh's coffin. The chamber's design, with its exact proportions and sound bounce, suggests a job we don't understand. Could it be a room for keeping frequencies, for matching with space forces, for holding something intangible but essential? The air passages, too narrow for human movement, point to stars with an accuracy that suggests more than symbolic meaning. Maybe the pyramid was a tool, a device constructed to interact with the universe in ways we're only starting to explore through vibration, through positioning, through the mathematics that control reality itself. Then there's the suggestion of something stranger. During the 1960s, Swiss writer Erich von Däniken suggested that ancient monuments like the Great Pyramid could be the work of visitors from space, beings who shared advanced knowledge with early humans. The idea sounds impossible, but think about the unusual things. A structure positioned to true north with nearly perfect accuracy, dimensions that contain Earth's measurements, and a level of engineering that pushes the limits of copper tools and human work. Could the pyramid be a signal, a marker left by a civilization not from this world, or one that worked with knowledge we've lost? The lack of writings might support this. Why write in a language when your message is meant for those who speak the worldwide language of mathematics? This leads us to a frightening possibility. What if the Great Pyramid was constructed to survive a disaster, not just a flood or a lack of rain, but a breakdown of civilization itself? The precession cycle contained in its sizing factor suggests a time scale that reaches past human memory. The pyramid's strength, surviving earthquakes, invasions, and 4,500 years of time, suggests a design meant for geological ages, not just royal periods. Its quietness, its lack of cultural markers, makes it worldwide. A message not for the Egyptians, not for their gods, but for whoever comes after. A civilization recovering from destruction, rediscovering the stars, would find in the pyramid's proportions a lesson of sorts, a teaching in pi, phi, and the Earth's position in the universe. As we stay with this thought, the pyramid becomes more than stone. It becomes a question, a test, a warning. It asks us not what we know, but what we're willing to admit we don't know. The mathematical codes are there, impossible to deny, carved in measurements that have outlasted empires. They tell of people who knew Earth's shape, the sky's rhythm, the constants that connect the universe. Were they the Egyptians, borrowing knowledge from a forgotten source? Were they a lost civilization wiped away by time or intentional choice? Or were they something else completely, leaving a legacy we're not ready to accept? The Great Pyramid stands not as a burial place for a king, but as a time machine for knowledge, a structure that contains truths too large to be spoken, too lasting to be forgotten. Its proportions are a language that needs no translation. It's positioning a map that needs no explanation. As you move towards sleep, picture standing in the king's chamber, surrounded by granite that vibrates with secrets. The quietness is thick, the air heavy, the stones waiting. They don't tell you who constructed them. They don't tell you why. They only ask that you measure, that you question, that you listen to the numbers that have been true since the stars started to shine. And in that quietness, you might hear the echo of a world we've forgotten. A world that constructed a machine to make sure we'd remember it once more. We step inside the center of the Great Pyramid itself, into rooms of granite and limestone that contain no body, no treasure, no story, only quietness. We've been told it's Khufu's tomb, a monument to a king's forever glory. However, what if it's not a burial place at all? What if this towering puzzle constructed with impossible accuracy was never meant to hold a pharaoh's remains, but to perform a purpose we can't yet understand? Rest back. Let the darkness of the desert surround you, and pay attention as we solve the mystery of what the Great Pyramid might really be. Inside, the structure is a maze of passages and rooms, each more puzzling than the one before. The descending passage digs into the bedrock, taking you to an unfinished underground chamber. The ascending passage climbs to the Grand Gallery, a rising corridor of polished stone, and past it sits the king's chamber, a granite center containing a single empty stone box. This, we're told, is Khufu's stone coffin, the pharaoh who constructed this wonder around 2580 BCE. However, the more carefully you look, the less it seems like a tomb, and the more it seems like something else completely. In ancient Egypt, death was not an ending but a trip, carefully planned and richly documented. Tombs were not simple graves. They were doorways to forever, decorated with picture writing, magic words, and pictures of the afterlife. The Book of the Dead, the pyramid texts, and countless writings guided the soul through the underworld, naming gods, showing challenges, and making sure of immortality. Pharaohs filled their resting places with treasures, canopic jars, shapti figurines, and gifts of food and wine. Even minor nobles had tombs painted with colorful wall paintings of daily life, farming, music, feasts meant to continue forever. The Valley of the Kings is a library of such stories, its walls shouting the names and actions of the dead. However, the Great Pyramid, it's quiet. No picture writing decorates its rooms. No paintings show the gods. No magic words point the way to the afterlife. Just stone, angles, and an emptiness where a king's legacy should exist. The king's chamber at the pyramid's center is a wonder of construction. Its walls, made of huge granite blocks dragged from Aswan 800 kilometers away, are fitted so perfectly that a razor blade can't fit between them. The ceiling, a series of granite beams, spreads out the weight of millions of tons above, steady for more than 4,500 years. Inside sits a rectangular granite box, frequently called a stone coffin, but it's unlike any other in Egypt. It has no lid, no carvings, no marks of mummification oils or sticky substances. It's too small to contain the nested coffins typical of royal burials, too plain for a pharaoh's greatness. No body was ever discovered, no burial objects, no fragments of ritual items. Compare this to Tutankhamun's tomb, overflowing with gold, chariots, and holy texts, or even the modest burials of lesser nobles packed with personal belongings. The Great Pyramid, supposedly the greatest tomb of all, gives nothing but emptiness. Some people argue it was robbed in ancient times, its treasures stolen, its writings removed. However, this theory falls apart under close examination. The passages show no evidence of forced entry, chisel marks, no broken seals, no scattered remains from quick theft. Tomb robbers in ancient Egypt were not careful. They left behind broken pottery, smashed furniture, and black marks from torches. Here there's nothing, no leftover material, no fragments, not even dust to indicate a burial was disturbed. The box itself, cold and undecorated, shows no damage from a lid being forced off or a body being taken out. To believe it was robbed, you'd have to picture thieves so careful they removed every mark, leaving the chamber as clean as the day it was closed. That's not robbery, that's erasure, and it seems far too planned. Other people suggest the pyramid was an early trial constructed before the tradition of decorating tombs started. However, this idea fails against the proof of its advancement. The Great Pyramid is no primitive experiment. Its geometry is perfect, its positioning to true north unmatched, its inside design a masterpiece of engineering. The Grand Gallery with its stepped ceiling is a structural wonder spreading out weight with an accuracy that later pyramids couldn't copy. Air passages reaching from the king's chamber match with stars like Orion's belt, indicating a purpose connected to the universe. Later pyramids like those of Khufu or Menkora are smaller, less exact, sometimes structurally weak. The bent pyramid of Sneferu, constructed earlier, almost fell down until its angle was changed during construction. If anything, the Great Pyramid is the highest point, not the start, of an art form that was never matched again. So if it's not a tomb, what is it? The lack of burial proof invites us to rethink its purpose. The king's chamber, with its strange sound properties, gives a hint. Sounds inside, whispers, chants, bounce back in ways that feel engineered, as if the space was designed to make certain frequencies louder. Researchers have measured the chamber's dimensions and discovered they match harmonic proportions, making echoes that stay unusually long. Some suggest it was a resonance room constructed to use sound or energy for a ritual or scientific purpose we don't understand. The granite, heavier than the surrounding limestone, increases this effect, shaking in response to certain tones. Could the pyramid have been a tool for interacting with powers past the physical, vibrational, cosmic, or even spiritual? The structure's astronomical positioning makes the mystery deeper. The air passages, too narrow for airflow, aim at specific stars, Orion's belt in the south, the pole star in the north. As they looked around 2450 BCE, this accuracy indicates an advanced understanding of heavenly mechanics, far past the useful astronomy of the Egyptians who tracked the Nile's floods, but left no record of such calculations. The pyramid's direction toward true north within a tiny fraction of a degree needs knowledge of Earth's axis and magnetic field, ideas not written down in ancient texts. Some researchers guess it was an observation place, a monument designed to map the heavens, maybe to match human activity with space cycles. However, why construct it on such a huge scale, with such lasting materials, if it was only for watching? A stronger idea appears. What if the Great Pyramid was a machine, not made of metal or wires, but of stone and purpose? Some theorists inspired by people like Nikola Tesla suggest it was designed to create or direct energy, maybe electromagnetic or acoustic, using rules we're only starting to rediscover. The granite in the king's chamber, rich in quartz, could work as a conductor or resonator, making natural energies stronger. The pyramid's shape, with its exact angles, might focus these powers, making a field effect we can't yet measure. Experiments during the 20th century discovered that small pyramid models could keep organic matter fresh or make blades sharper, suggesting properties connected to their geometry. While these claims are argued about, they add fuel to guessing that the Great Pyramid was a technology, its purpose lost when its builders disappeared. Then there's the shadow of a stranger possibility. The pyramid's size, accuracy, and quietness have made some people wonder if it was constructed with help from beyond Earth. Erich von Däniken, in his controversial book, Chariots of the Gods, suggested that extraterrestrial beings might have guided ancient builders, sharing knowledge of mathematics and engineering. The Great Pyramid's unusual features, its positioning, its weight spreading, its lack of cultural markers fit this story. Why else would a civilization construct something so huge but leave no name, no story? Could it be a signal, a message to the stars, or a gift from visitors who knew their time on Earth was brief? This idea stretches what we believe. However, the pyramid's very existence stretches what we think is possible. More reasonable, but no less deep, is the theory that the pyramid was a storage place not of bodies or treasure, but of knowledge. Its quietness, its lack of writings might be intentional, designed to communicate to any civilization in any time through the worldwide language of geometry. Unlike papyrus or picture writing, which break down or become impossible to read, stone lasts. The pyramid's proportions, containing pi and phi, are a message that goes beyond language, culture, or time. It could be a protection against disaster, a flood, a breakdown, a forgetting that wipes away all else. By constructing something that could survive thousands of years, its creators made sure that future generations would discover not a king's name, but a blueprint of the universe, a reminder of what was known and lost. This leads us to the center of the puzzle. The Great Pyramid doesn't act like a tomb. It doesn't perform the ceremonies of Egyptian religion. It doesn't glorify a pharaoh or his gods. It stands separate, a structure that feels foreign to the culture that says it made it. Its only writing, Khufu's faint royal symbol, is a whisper in a monument that shouts with presence. If it was constructed for a king, why is it so empty? If it was constructed for the gods, why is it so quiet? If it was constructed for us, what are we supposed to learn? The pyramid doesn't give answers. It only watches, its stones containing secrets that refuse to give in. As you move towards sleep, picture yourself in the king's chamber, surrounded by granite that vibrates with ancient purpose. The air is heavy, the quietness alive, the stones pressing down with the weight of questions not asked. The Great Pyramid is not a tomb, not a temple, but a keeper, a machine, a map, a memory. It was constructed to last longer than the world that made it, to communicate to those who come afterward, not in words, but in the language of angles and echoes. Whoever constructed it, whatever they intended, they left us a test, to look past the stories, to listen to the quietness, and to wonder what truth sits in the space where a king should be but isn't. We uncover a leftover that challenges the very center of the story we've been told, a single piece of limestone, covered in sand, that tells not of creation but of repair. The Inventory Stela discovered in the shadow of the Sphinx tells us that Khufu, the pharaoh given credit for the Great Pyramid, didn't construct Giza's monuments. He discovered them ancient and holy and tried only to protect their power. Shut your eyes. Let the desert's breath take you, and pay attention as a forgotten stone rewrites history. It was 1858 when a French archaeologist, Auguste Mariette, bent down in the sand at the Sphinx's base. He wasn't looking for grand discoveries that day, only clearing away debris as part of a regular survey of the Giza plateau. His workers, digging through hundreds of years of piled-up sand, dug up a broken, worn piece of limestone, unremarkable at first look. No gold decorated it. No jewels shined. No royal decorations caught the eye. It was just a piece covered in picture writing that required careful translation to show their meaning. However, when the text was figured out, it sent a shake through the world of Egyptology, a shake that has been quietly hidden ever since. The Inventory Stela, as it's now named, didn't sing the praises of a pharaoh's victories or divine right. It told a more humble, stranger story. Khufu, the great king of the 4th dynasty, didn't carve the Sphinx or build the pyramids. He discovered them already ancient and dedicated himself to their maintenance. The Stela's text is unlike the boastful writings typical of Egyptian monuments. Pharaohs were experts at promoting themselves, carving their names and actions into every surface to guarantee immortality. Temples carried their royal symbols, statues announced their divine ancestry, and tombs showed their journey to the gods. However, the Inventory Stela communicates in a different way, respectful, almost humble. It describes how Khufu, ruler of Upper and Lower Egypt, came across the Sphinx covered in sand, its form damaged but its presence commanding. He didn't say he had constructed it. What he did was organize its repair, clearing the sand dunes that covered its body and constructing temples close by to honor its guardian power. The Stela mentions Isis, goddess of magic, as owner of the pyramid, and talks about a temple next to the Sphinx, now disappeared in time. Most strikingly, it lists shrines and gifts Khufu created, not as a builder, but as a caretaker of something much older than his rule. This is no small detail. In ancient Egypt, monuments were more than stone. They were religious statements, evidence of a pharaoh's divine right to rule. Every structure had a sponsor, a purpose, a connection to the cosmic order that justified the king's power. To discover a monument like the Sphinx, positioned with the equinox sunrise and respected as holy without a clear royal ownership, is not just unusual, it's impossible to believe. The Stela indicates that even Khufu's priests, the builders of his divine mythology, thought the Sphinx belonged to a time before their king, a holy landscape that required respect instead of ownership. If Khufu, the supposed master of Giza, saw himself as a restorer instead of a builder, what does that tell us about the monuments we give him credit for? Could the whole Giza complex, pyramid, Sphinx, and temples come from before the pharaohs, received by a civilization that said they were its own? The effects are huge. If the Sphinx was already ancient when Khufu came, the Great Pyramid, positioned perfectly with its stair, might also be older. The traditional timeline puts the pyramid's construction around 2580 BCE, a high point of Old Kingdom engineering. However, the Stela suggests a different story, one where Egypt's greatest monuments were not created from Khufu's ambition, but found by him, left over from a forgotten era. This questions the very base of Egyptology, which depends on the belief that Giza's wonders came from the Fourth Dynasty's brilliance. If they were received, constructed by a civilization lost to history, then Egypt itself becomes a layer on top of something older, something intentionally hidden. However, here's where the sand grows heavy with quietness. The Inventory Stela, despite its explosive effects, was quickly pushed aside. After its discovery, it was moved to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, where it sits in darkness, rarely shown, and never featured in major displays. Egyptologists dismissed it as late-period propaganda, a text from the 26th dynasty, some 2,000 years after Khufu's time, written by priests with questionable reasons. They said it was historical fiction, a fake to serve political goals we can't fully figure out. Textbooks barely mention it, and when they do, it's as a curiosity, not a serious document. This dismissal is so complete, so unified that it feels less like scholarship and more like a coordinated effort to cover an inconvenient truth. Let's stop and think about this. Why would priests over 1,000 years after Khufu invent a story that makes his legacy smaller? Egyptian tradition was obsessed with glorifying pharaohs, especially foundational figures like Khufu, whose name was the same as the greatest monument on earth. Making up stories afterward was common, but it always worked to lift up rulers, connecting them to past greatness, not reducing them to caretakers. The Inventory Stela does the opposite. It shows Khufu as a servant of older gods, a restorer of holy sites he didn't create. If this was propaganda, it's the most counterproductive in history, weakening the divine authority of a legendary king. It creates more questions than it answers, putting doubt on the very story it should strengthen. Why would anyone create such a story unless it contained a piece of truth too uncomfortable to accept? The dismissal of the Stela creates its own contradictions. Egyptologists depend on other late-period texts when they support the established timeline. However, the Inventory Stela is labeled unreliable because it doesn't. This double standard smells of intellectual gatekeeping, a way to protect the accepted timeline while stopping inquiry. The Stela's message, that the Sphinx and maybe the pyramids were already there when Khufu came, threatens to untangle the organized progression of Egyptian history. It indicates that the pharaohs were not the originators of Giza's wonders, but inheritors, guardians of a legacy they couldn't fully say was theirs, and if that's true, who were the real builders? What knowledge did they have? And why was it covered beneath the weight of a new civilization's story? This question echoes past Egypt. In ancient Sumer, texts like the Enuma Elish describe ziggurats and holy sites connected to gods older than human memory, structures that kings repaired instead of built. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh tells of a city, Uruk, with walls constructed by the gods before its kings took power. Could the Inventory Stela be part of a larger pattern where ancient civilizations said older monuments were their own, weaving them into new myths to make their rule legitimate? The Stela's reference to Isis as owner of the pyramid is particularly haunting. Isis, a goddess of creation and magic, was rarely connected to specific monuments. Her presence in the text indicates the pyramid held an importance past Khufu's rule, connected to powers or knowledge that came before his dynasty. And then there's the issue of what's missing. The Stela is broken, its edges worn, but the text that remains is curiously selective. It details Khufu's repair, his temples, his gifts, but says nothing about who constructed the Sphinx or when. This absence feels intentional, as if the stone was meant to keep just enough to honor the monument's holiness without showing its beginnings. Some guess that earlier writings, now lost, might have named the true builders, a civilization removed from history, maybe by time, maybe by intentional choice. The Stela's survival, hidden away in a museum, feels like a whisper that slipped through the cracks, a voice that wasn't supposed to communicate. As we sink deeper into this mystery, the Inventory Stela becomes more than a leftover. It's a test of everything we've been taught about Giza. It tells us that Khufu, the great builder, may have been a pilgrim, bending before monuments he couldn't say were his. It tells us that the Sphinx and maybe the pyramid were part of a holy landscape older than Egypt itself. And it tells us that someone, somewhere wanted that truth to disappear, locked away in a museum, dismissed as myth. As you move towards sleep, picture Khufu standing before the Sphinx, its stone face staring past him to a horizon he couldn't understand. The Inventory Stela is a whisper from that moment, a whisper that says, "The past is not what we believe, and the truth is covered deeper than we dare to search." This evening we travel to a moment more than 1,000 years afterward, when a prince never expected to be king lay down in the shadow of the Sphinx and heard its voice in a dream. The dream stealer of Thutmose, IV, tells a tale of divine promises and buried gods. However, more than that, it shows a truth that shakes the foundations of Egypt's history. The Sphinx was forgotten even by the civilization that said it was theirs. Rest back. Let the desert's quiet surround you and pay attention, as a stone tells of secrets lost to time. It's around 1401 BCE in the 18th dynasty of Egypt, a time of power and wealth. The Giza Plateau, home to the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, should be the center of holy respect, a proof of the pharaoh's divine legacy. However, something is wrong. The Sphinx, that huge guardian of stone, is disappearing. Sand has swallowed its body, leaving only its head and chest above the sand dunes. No priests care for its presence. There are no celebrations that look up to it. No carvings explain why it was made. This is different from the famous landmark we know now, which is praised as the Watcher of Giza. It is an uncared-for piece of the past, overlooked by the same people who are said to have built it for Khufu only 800 years before. Why would such a huge and important structure in Egypt's holy lands be left to be covered by the desert? This question introduces a tale that seems more like a legend than a true story, but it is written on red stone between the paws of the Sphinx. Prince Thutmose, who was a younger son of Pharaoh Amenhotep II, was not meant to become the king. His older siblings were in line before him, and their royal family connection guaranteed their position in Egypt's grand plan. But one afternoon, while hunting on the Giza Plateau, Thutmose took a break in the shadow of the Sphinx's body, which was buried in sand. Feeling very tired, he drifted to sleep right between its paws, where a large amount of sand had gathered and covered the lion's body from view. The events that followed are carved on the dream stele, a stone slab that you can still see. The writing on it is proof of a time that altered the prince's destiny. While he was sleeping, the Sphinx talked to him, saying it was Horemakhet. This was the god of the horizon, the protector of the sunrise. Its voice did not sound victorious, but instead sounded sad and weighed down by hundreds of years of being ignored. The Sphinx grumbled about sand getting in its throat, making it hard for its spirit to breathe, and about being forgotten by the people who used to respect it. Day after day, the Sphinx had seen the sun come up all by itself with no gifts, no religious leaders, and no one noticing its holy watch. The god made a deal with Thutmose that was both easy to understand and very meaningful. If the prince would remove all the sand from its body, fix the temples that had fallen apart, and bring back the old ceremonies, he would become the king of Egypt, not as a reward for wanting power, but as a job he earned by helping. Thutmose agreed to the deal. He gathered workers, moved many tons of sand, and uncovered the complete body of the Sphinx for the first time in a very long time. He gave gifts of gold, sweet-smelling incense, and said prayers, and he also started a new group of priests to keep its worship going. In just a few months, because of some things that happened that no history books clearly describe, Thutmose became Pharaoh Thutmose IV, the leader of a country he was not supposed to rule. The dream stele, which was put up to remember this event, is a monument to his meeting with a god. It is a tale of a god that was forgotten who got its importance back because a prince was dedicated. However, this story is not just an advertisement for the king. It is a break in Egypt's history, a split that shows just how much the Sphinx had been forgotten. If Khufu really did build it like people say, then only 800 years passed between his time as king and Thutmose's time. Egypt was a culture that really cared about keeping things the same, writing down its kings, drawing maps of its tombs, and saving its gods on stone and paper. The 18th family of rulers had lists of kings from more than 1,000 years before, with their names and what they did carefully. But the Sphinx, a huge statue next to the Great Pyramid, did not have a group of people who worshipped it, no priests, and no special days on the religious calendar. It had basically disappeared, covered not only by sand, but also by being forgotten by a whole group of people who should have treasured it. How could something so large and so connected to Egypt's beliefs about the gods be lost from people's minds? The way the dream stele is written adds to the puzzle. It is not a proud announcement of a king's greatness, which is what most carvings are like. It is quiet and almost like a personal story, telling about the Sphinx's pain in its throat, its quiet voice, and its job not being done. The god talks about being lonely and about the many years it spent watching the sunrise without anyone noticing. This does not sound like the usual kind of story made up to make a king look good. It seems like a real meeting, a time when a prince found something very old and left it behind, something that needed to be remembered. The stele gives details about the digging process, what the sand was like, how hard it was to move, and how the stone looked after being buried for hundreds of years. These details, which are ordinary but clear, are not common for royal messages, which usually talk about getting help from gods instead of the difficulties of a project. They make it seem like there is a truth to the story that is too real to be completely made up. And still, there is something suspicious about the stele itself. The top part of it, where the name of the Sphinx's builder might have been written, is gone. The stone is broken cleanly, not worn away by weather, but cut off, maybe a long time ago, as if a person wanted to remove a very important part of the story. What is left of the story helps Thutmose's claim to be king, a deal with a god, a successful dig, and a political wonder. But the fact that the builder's name is missing seems planned, making sure the story helps the king now without questioning the past. Experts on Egypt say the stele is just a story to explain why an unlikely person became king. But this reason has a problem, because for the story to work as an advertisement, the Sphinx had to have already been forgotten, and its meaning lost to the same people who supposedly created it. Why would Thutmose connect his right to rule to a statue no one thought about, unless it had a special power that was older than his own family of rulers? This leads us to a more serious question. If the family of rulers in the 18th dynasty had forgotten the Sphinx, what does that tell us about where it came from? In Mesopotamia, writings like the Epic of Gilgamesh talk about old cities and buildings that were said to be made by gods or heroes from long ago, and no one knew who really built them. Could the Sphinx be part of a similar story, a leftover from a time before the kings of Egypt that was respected but not claimed by anyone? The stele's mention of Horemakhet, the horizon god, connects the Sphinx to the sun's daily journey, a common symbol that existed before the religion of Egypt. Maybe it was a holy place long before the pharaohs came to power. Its purpose might have been so important that even they could only show it respect, not build it themselves. The dream stele's lack of information about who built the Sphinx is similar to the lack of information on the monument itself. No writings are carved on its body. No royal names claim that they made it. This missing information, just like with the pyramids, feels like it was done on purpose, as if the builders wanted to be unknown instead of famous. But why were they keeping a secret, a piece of knowledge that was too holy or too unsafe to be written down? Or did they come from a culture so long ago that their names were already gone by the time Egypt began? The stele makes it seem like the second idea is true, that the Sphinx was a puzzle even to Thutmose, a god that spoke from a time before time began, asking to be remembered by a prince who just happened to find it. As we think more about this puzzle, the dream stele becomes like a mirror that shows us our own questions. It shows us that the Sphinx, which is a famous symbol now, was once forgotten, buried under sand and ignored. It shows us that a prince heard its voice, not sounding powerful but sounding desperate, asking to be saved from being forgotten. And it shows us that Egypt, even with all its written records and traditions, could forget about its most amazing monument. As you start to fall asleep, picture yourself lying between the paws of the Sphinx, with the sand feeling warm under you, its stone face looking at a sunrise older than anyone can remember. The dream stele is not just a tale about a king. It is a call from a god that was lost and a question that is still here. What other things have we forgotten, and who made it so we did? We go down below the Giza plateau into a place of secret rooms and lost tunnels. Here, the ground itself protects secrets that are older than the buildings above it. What is underneath the pyramids and the Sphinx? It is a web of tunnels, empty spaces, and rooms that suggest they were for something much more than graves, a purpose that someone somewhere has tried to keep secret. Lie down. Let the quiet of the desert surround you and come with me into the dark places under Giza. The Giza Plateau is not just a group of huge stone buildings standing in the sun. Under its ground, there is a maze, an underground world that goes against everything we have been told about ancient Egypt. For more than 100 years, explorers have told stories of strange finds below the pyramids and the Sphinx, empty spaces that are too perfect to be made by nature. They found tunnels too straight to be just for tombs. They also found rooms that look like they are part of a plan we do not understand yet. These discoveries, written down in old notebooks and on maps that are almost forgotten, show a picture of a plateau that is empty inside, a system of spaces made with a plan, kept secret from the world above. But whenever these finds are talked about, they disappear just as fast, being sealed up, ignored, or said to be untrue. The question is not just about what is under Giza. It is also why we are not permitted to find out. One of the most well-known of these underground places is the Osiris Shaft, which is near the walkway of Khufu's pyramid. This straight-down tunnel goes more than 30 meters deep into the stone ground. Going down, it feels more like a trip to a different world than just a simple tomb. The tunnel has 3 levels, and each one is more confusing than the one before it. The top room is tiny and can only be reached through a tight tunnel that requires special tools to get through. The second level is full of water from the ground, a dark barrier that has stopped a complete search, but has protected whatever is underneath. The third level, the one that is deepest, opens up to a big room with 6 smaller spaces on the sides, carved with a skill that is as good as the stone cutting of the pyramids above. In the middle of it is a stone box, which is often called a sarcophagus, but it seems to have a different purpose. There are no marks from a body breaking down, no signs of mummification, and no proof it was ever used to hold a person. The walls of the room, which are smooth and have no decorations, have tool marks that are so similar they seem to have been made by one group of talented workers. The way sound travels is strange, as whispers can be heard very well, but louder noises seem to be absorbed, as if the room was made to control sound. This is not a regular tomb. Egyptian graves, even for less important people, were packed with writings, gifts, and special objects to help the soul. The Osiris Shaft has none of that, just quiet, careful work and a purpose we do not know. Some people call it a make-believe tomb for Osiris, the god of the afterlife from a later time. But its depth, the quality of its work, and its emptiness make it feel older and more unusual, as if it is from a time before the gods of Egypt even existed. The shaft is not open for people to visit, it is not studied very often, and it is hardly ever talked about in official books. Why, if it is only an empty room, is it kept so secret? The reason is not in what is inside it, but in what it hints at about the secret depths of the plateau. The Osiris Shaft is just one part of a bigger mystery. In the 1800s, the first explorers like Ernest Alfred Wallace Budge talked about underground rooms below Giza that were much larger than what a tomb would need. Budge, an English Egyptologist, wrote about tunnels and empty spaces that seemed too planned to be natural and too big to be for just one burial. During Napoleon's trip in 1798, experts drew maps of a system of underground areas, including hallways, stairs, and rooms that linked the pyramids and the Sphinx in a way that suggested a single, organized plan. These maps, which were made before modern visitors changed the area, show things that are not on today's official plans. Some tunnels were filled up with broken rocks, as if someone closed them on purpose. Others were clean, as if someone took care of them long after they were made. These reports, which were specific and careful, were called over-the-top stories by explorers from other countries who did not realize what they were looking at. But the maps are still around, hidden away in collections, telling stories of a Giza we are not supposed to see. In 1926, Herbert Eustace Winlock, an American archaeologist, wrote about underground burial chambers below the plateau, rooms with carved walls, stairs that went deeper than any tomb needed, and tunnels that made geometric shapes instead of the messy look of natural caves. These descriptions point to something more than just places for burial, a whole system, a base for a reason we cannot figure out yet. But no museums have models of these areas on display. No school books talk about them being there. The world of experts calls them cracks, unfinished tunnels, or mistakes made by the first explorers. But the fact that these stories are so similar over many years and from different cultures makes ignoring them seem less like science and more like hiding something. The strongest proof appeared in 2008 when Egyptian scientists used a special radar that can see through the ground to map what is under the Giza plateau. Their scans showed a system of empty spaces, tunnels, and rooms that go on for a long way under the pyramids and the Sphinx. Some of these matched the old maps made by Napoleon's group, proving that the early explorers had seen real buildings, not just imagined things. Others were completely new, big, geometric empty spaces that could not be explained by natural wearing away of the rock. Under the Sphinx, they discovered areas with straight sides, which suggests they were built by people. Below the Great Pyramid, they found rooms that were not connected to any known tunnels, which hints at an older, separate time of construction. Pictures from these studies, though not common, show cut stone, simple steps, and arches in the dark, things that do not look like the roughly cut tunnels of Egyptian tombs or the smooth stones of the pyramids above. These finds indicated a complicated underground system, one that came before or is separate from the monuments we can see. And then the access was blocked. The Egyptian government, through the Supreme Council of Antiquities, stated there is nothing there. There was no reason given for the pictures, no mention of the radar information, and no reference to the old maps. Permission to visit was taken away. The discoveries were hidden in official quietness. Reporters who tried to get answers were told that nothing was found. Tunnels that had been written about, measured, and even gone into were sealed up again. This is not the only time this has happened. In the 1930s, a dig under the Sphinx was said to have found a room between its front legs that workers said was built by people. It was filled back in very quickly, and no official story was ever released. Later radar scans showed there was an empty space in that same spot, but outside researchers were not allowed to look into it. The official story has not changed. Nothing important is under Giza. But when proof is photographed, mapped, and then called unimportant, that is not archaeology. It is erasing history. This pattern of hiding things brings up a scary question. What is under Giza that is so dangerous it needs to be kept secret? The underground system points to a purpose other than graves. Maybe it was a foundation for the whole plateau that was built before the pyramids were even there. The way sound works in the Osiris shaft, the geometric straightness of the mapped empty spaces, and the clean cuts of the hidden tunnels all point to a man-made system created for a job we do not understand. Some people think it was a place for ceremonies meant to make sound or energy stronger, like the sound rooms in old places like Malta's hypogeum, where certain sounds can make people feel like they are in a trance. Others suggest it was a place to store things, not for gold but for knowledge, like the legendary Hall of Records that Edgar Cayce talked about, which was said to contain the secrets of a lost civilization. The most disturbing idea is that these rooms were there long before the pharaohs. If the Sphinx, with its marks from water, is from 7,000 years ago, could this system have been made by the same people? A civilization that changed the rock itself, carving out spaces to survive a disaster they knew was coming. The building methods, smooth walls, and exact angles do not always look like Egyptian work. Some tool marks hint at tools or ways of doing things that were not known in the Old Kingdom, pointing to a technology that has been forgotten. The water-filled second level of the Osiris shaft, kept safe by the water, might have clues that have not been touched by time. But it is still not open to anyone, its secrets kept quiet. This leads us to a more troubling fact. The hiding of these discoveries seems to be on purpose, as if the underground system is a threat to the story of Egyptian history. If Giza was constructed on an older base, if its rooms were carved by a people before the pharaohs, it messes up the timeline of human civilization. It would mean that the Egyptians were not the first to create their greatest wonders, but that they inherited them, taking credit for something they could not make themselves. The government's refusal to look further, their quick dismissal of proof, is like a pattern seen in other places where texts are lost in fires, writings are destroyed in earthquakes, and discoveries are silenced by powerful groups. Why? What could be so threatening about a few tunnels and rooms? Maybe it is not the spaces themselves, but what they stand for. A part of history we are not prepared to learn about, a civilization we are not meant to remember. As you begin to fall asleep, imagine yourself going down the Osiris shaft. The stone is cool as you touch it. The air is heavy with the feeling of a long time past. The rooms below Giza are not just empty spaces, they are questions carved into the rock, waiting for someone to find the answers. They tell of a time before kings, before gods, when the plateau was made for a purpose we can only imagine. The system beneath the pyramids is a map of what has been forgotten, a maze where memory itself is buried, waiting for a person brave enough to follow its paths. In 1993, a tiny wheeled robot called Upuat, which means opener of the ways after an ancient Egyptian god, made history. It was created by a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink and was sent into the Great Pyramid to look at its small air shafts, which are tunnels too narrow for people to go into. These shafts, which come from the Queen's chamber, were for a long time believed to be just for show, maybe pointed at stars or for the pharaoh's spirit to travel up. They go up at very sharp angles, are hardly 20 centimeters across, and their walls are polished so smoothly that it is hard to believe they were made with old tools. Gantenbrink's job was simple, to make the air flow better and to map the shaft. But what Upuat 2 discovered was not ordinary at all. As it went up the southern shaft, which is over 60 meters long, its camera sent back pictures that amazed everyone. It showed a stone door that fit perfectly, with 2 copper pins sticking out like quiet guards. This was not a pile of fallen rocks or a messy end to a tunnel, but a carefully made barrier that had been sealed for thousands of years, hiding something the pyramid's builders did not want to be discovered. The video was captivating. The walls of the shaft, which had not been touched by time, shone with perfection, and their limestone blocks were put together so well that no glue was needed. The angles were always perfect. The surfaces had no tool marks, as if they were carved using a method we do not know. Then at the very end the door showed up, a flat, rectangular piece of stone. Its copper pins shined in the robot's light. These pins were not for opening or holding. They were too tiny and placed in a strange way for any real use. Were they just for decoration, to show a holy line, or something completely different? The discovery caused a big stir in the world of archaeology. Here was proof that there were secret spaces inside the pyramid, spaces that had been closed since it was built, which went against the idea that every room had already been found. The world held its breath as news headlines announced a new time of discovery. Could this door lead to a hidden room, a place with old knowledge, or something even more mysterious? But the excitement did not last long. Gantenbrink's job was suddenly ended by Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. He was no longer allowed in the pyramid. His work was stopped with no reason given. The official reason was that he had done more than he was supposed to, which was only about airflow, not searching for new things. However, the door was found during a normal check of the shaft, and stopping the work right at the moment of a big find seemed like more than just rules. It seemed like someone was trying to hide something. The news stories died down and the door stayed closed, with its secrets still hidden. Why? What could be behind a piece of stone that would make someone stop the work so quickly? The question was not answered for almost 10 years. In 2002, a different group was allowed to go in. They had a better robot, the Pyramid Rover, which had cameras, drills, and special fiber optic tools. The world watched again, hoping for answers after so many years of waiting. Live TV shows promised to show what was on the other side of the strange door. The robot went down the same southern shaft, and its cameras saw the same perfectly made stone walls until it got to the door with the copper pins. Very carefully, it drilled a tiny hole through the stone, a process that showed how incredibly hard the stone was, as if it was made to stop people from getting in. A fiber optic camera was put through the hole, and everyone waited, hoping to see treasures, writings, or a look into the center of the pyramid. What the camera revealed was another room that was empty, perfectly made and quiet, with a second stone door on the opposite wall. There were no hieroglyphs and no objects, just more stone, more mystery, and another blockage. This find only made the puzzle more confusing. Why would someone build a tunnel too small for people, leading to a sealed door just to have another door behind it? The room's walls were as smooth as the tunnels, and it was built with the same care, which suggests it was for something other than decoration or a ceremony. The copper pins, which were flattened, seemed to show that the first door was important, maybe as a warning or a sign of something holy. But the second door, which was exactly the same in its quietness, suggested a plan to make things difficult, to confuse, and to guard something that was not meant to be found. The TV show ended, the news reporters moved on, and no more trips were made. The second door is still not open, its secrets are kept hidden, and the official story went back to being quiet. Some people said the puzzle was figured out. They said the shafts were just for show, the doors meant nothing, and the room was empty. But being empty is not the same as being nothing. It is a decision, a plan, a message carved in stone. The meaning of this is huge. The shafts and doors suggest that the Great Pyramid has spaces we have not yet discovered. They were built with a skill that makes us question what we know about old technology. The shafts keep perfect lines for over 60 meters. Their angles are always exact, and their surfaces are perfect. This is not the work of simple tools or a rushed job. It is the result of a plan where every little thing was thought out. The copper pins, made from a metal that was holy in Egyptian religion, add another puzzle. Copper was connected to the gods and divine power, and it was hard to find and work with in old times. Why would they put it in a tunnel that no one could get into? Some people think the pins are signs, not for opening the door, but to show how important it is, a line that should not be crossed, a secret that should not be told. This brings us to a daring idea. The doors might lead to the famous Hall of Records, a room that the psychic Edgar Cayce talked about in the early 1900s. Cayce said that under the Sphinx and inside the pyramid, there is a place with knowledge from a lost civilization, maybe Atlantis, that has texts, tools, or even technologies that could change history. The strange radar signals under the Sphinx that were found in the 1980s and 2000s support the idea of hidden spaces, and the pyramid shafts could be connected to this system. The doors, which were sealed so carefully, might protect this collection of knowledge, meant to be found only at a certain time or by people who are ready to understand it. The copper pins, which are a symbol of a connection to the gods, could mark the entrance to this holy knowledge, a test of cleverness instead of strength. But why did they stop looking? The silencing of Gantenbrink and the stop after the pyramid rovers' find suggest it was more than just being careful. It suggests they were afraid. The Egyptian government, with support from groups like the Supreme Council of Antiquities, has always blocked entry to important sites. Is it to protect the monuments or to protect a certain story? If the doors lead to proof of a civilization that came before Egypt, one with amazing technology or knowledge, it would mess up the timeline of human history. The pyramid, which is said to have been built by Khufu, would become a piece of an older world, and the foundation of Egyptology would fall apart. This threat might be the reason for the pattern of denial, with tunnels being sealed, radar information being ignored, and researchers being sent away. It is as if the truth behind the doors is too scary to look at. This pattern is not just seen in Giza. In Mesoamerica, digs at Teotihuacan found tunnels under the Pyramid of the Sun that had been sealed for hundreds of years. But the exploration was stopped by official rules. In Turkey, the old site of Göbekli Tepe, which is 12,000 years old, had long waits in its study. Its meaning for early civilization was too big to accept right away. The doors in the Great Pyramid are like these other examples. Discoveries that question the story of human development are met with quiet, not with science. Could there be a worldwide effort, either old or new, to keep some truths secret? Some people even whisper about aliens being involved, suggesting that the pyramid's perfection and hidden rooms point to builders from other planets, an idea made popular by Erich von Däniken. While this is just a guess, it highlights the question of why someone would build something so complicated and so hard to get to, unless it was supposed to stay a secret. Picture Cairo in the late 1800s, a city buzzing with the excitement of discovery. Collectors from Europe, experts and explorers searched through Egypt's markets and monasteries, eager for artifacts from its ancient past. The 19th century was the best time for Egyptology, a time when every object and every piece of papyrus held the promise of revealing the secrets of a civilization that had amazed the world. In a peaceful Coptic monastery, hidden away from the busy streets of Cairo, a collector, who might have been from Austria or France, met an old monk who was the guardian of a small stack of old papers. These were not just regular writings. For hundreds of years, Coptic monasteries had been safe places for knowledge, saving pieces of early Christian and pre-Islamic texts through wars, attacks, and the constant passage of time. The monk said that his collection contained valuable items that had been passed down for many generations, texts that had lasted when great kingdoms collapsed, copied over and over by people who respected their importance. Among these old papers was one scroll that was different. It was written in Sahidic Coptic, a form of the language from Egypt's early Christian times, and it had older words that the monk did not understand, clues of a language that came even before the Coptic language. The things written on the scroll, as the collector was told, were unbelievable. It talked about a land by the Nile before it followed its current path, before the river's big curve, and before the delta was created. It described 3 large stone beacons, not called pyramids, but buildings that were lined up with the stars and were sealed not as tombs, but as safe places for memories. The writing called them ancient, made before language existed, before the Nile River changed its direction, and before the kings of Egypt came to rule, and when the collector asked for more information, the monk's answer was mysterious. They were created before words, before the river knew where to go. This was not a story about pharaohs or gods. It was a peek into a time before the history that we are familiar with. The collector bought the scroll and others and brought it to Europe, where scholars who studied Eastern cultures were ready to figure out its secrets. The 19th century was an era of careful research, and universities and museums spent a lot of money to translate old texts. Language experts would have carefully studied the Coptic writing. Historians would have compared it to other things they already knew, and archaeologists would have tried to connect its descriptions to real places. The scroll had the potential to be like a Rosetta Stone, a way to understand a part of human history we have never known. Its description of the pyramids as beacons and safe places for memories suggested they were not tombs, but something different, maybe places to store knowledge, built to last through a disaster that wiped out their makers. If this was true, this text could have completely changed the timeline of Egyptian civilization, putting the pyramids in a time before history, connected to a people we have never even heard of. But before even one word could be translated, something terrible happened, or at least that is the story we are told. The information is frustratingly unclear. Some stories say a fire burned down the collector's private office, turning the scroll into dust. Others say it was a building for storing documents, maybe in Vienna or Lyon, where the paper was kept. The fact that the story is not clear is suspicious in itself, as if it was supposed to fade away. What we do know is this: the scroll was lost, along with a lot of the collector's other items, in a fire that left behind no copies, no pictures, and no detailed notes. This was not just any loss. In the 19th century, experts knew how delicate old texts were. Important papers were regularly copied, drawn, or written about to avoid such terrible events. The Nag Hammadi Library, another valuable Coptic collection, made it through because of such careful actions. But this scroll, which could have been the most important discovery of its time, disappeared completely, leaving behind only a letter from someone else that quoted the monk's strange words about the Nile and the beacons. This disappearance seems too lucky, happening at the perfect time. A text that might have shown the pyramids existed before language, before Egypt, was burned right when it got to the people who could understand it. The letter, which is the only remaining proof, does not give any information beyond what the monk said, as if the scroll's entire existence was meant to be a quiet rumor, not a loud fact. Historians say the story is just a mistake, suggesting that the scroll, if it was real, was a later Gnostic story, a symbolic retelling of Egypt's legendary past. They bring up the 19th century business of selling fake artifacts, where local people sold made-up objects to excited Europeans. But this reason feels like an attempt to control the story, a way to hide an inconvenient idea. If the scroll was a fake, why burn it before anyone could check if it was real? Why make sure that no expert, no language specialist, could ever look at its words? The loss of the scroll is part of a troubling pattern. Throughout history, texts that go against the main stories have a way of vanishing. In the 1700s, French scholars told of a carving near Aswan that listed kings who ruled before Menes, who was supposed to be the first king of Egypt. It could have made Egypt's history thousands of years longer, but the wall fell down in an earthquake, the copies were lost, and the place was never dug up again. In the early 20th century, a German language expert said he had translated a Nubian papyrus that talked about stones of resonance west of the Nile, but he died in World War I and his notes were lost. Each separate event looks like bad luck, but altogether they suggest a plan, an unseen force making sure that certain facts do not last long enough to be known. The Coptic scroll, with its mention of pyramids before language, fits this pattern perfectly. It was not lost because it got old, but because of a fire that happened at the very moment it might have revealed too much. What makes the scroll so fascinating is what it might have contained. If it described the pyramids as safe places for memories built before the Nile's current path, it matches other clues we have found. The water damage on the Sphinx points to a time 7,000 years ago when there was rain in a green Sahara. The mathematical codes in the Great Pyramid suggest a knowledge of the Earth's size and the cycles of the stars. The underground system beneath Giza hints at a structure older than the pharaohs. The scroll could have connected all these ideas, naming a civilization that built the wonders of Giza before Egypt even started. A civilization that locked its knowledge in stone, knowing that its own time was ending. The monk's words, "before the Nile changed," are especially spooky. Geological evidence shows that the Nile's path did change over thousands of years, and its delta was created around 4000 BCE. If the scroll dated the pyramids to this earlier time, it would put them in a prehistoric world, questioning our ideas about human development. This leads us to a more serious question. Who had the ability to destroy such a text and for what reason? The fire was not caused by war or invasion, like the burning of the Library of Alexandria or the destruction of Mayan texts by Spanish conquerors. It occurred during a time of peace, in the possession of a collector who had every reason to keep it safe. Was it a mistake, or was it a race to protect a certain story? If the scroll proved the pyramids were older than Egypt, it would undo the myth of their creation by pharaohs, suggesting the Egyptians were inheritors, not creators. It would make us reconsider the beginnings of massive buildings, the spread of advanced knowledge, and the chance of a lost civilization, maybe Atlantis, as Plato described, or another culture wiped out by a disaster. Such a truth might have been too risky, not for national safety, but for the stories we tell ourselves about our role in history. As you drift off to sleep, imagine you are holding that delicate scroll, its ink disappearing as you touch it, its words hinting at a world that existed before words. The Coptic scroll is lost, but its absence is more powerful than its text ever could have been. It is a reminder that some truths are too big to be contained, too delicate to survive the fires of time or the people who start them. The scroll was burned, but its memory remains, a whisper of a time when the pyramids existed before kings, before language, before the Nile made its path, waiting for us to remember what was never meant to be forgotten. The Giza Plateau is a monument to what humans can achieve, or at least, that is what we are taught. The Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and the temples are all said to be from the 4th dynasty, a sign of Egypt's greatest period. However, every clue we have looked at suggests a different tale. Water damage hints at an origin before recorded history. Mathematical codes are too complex for that time. Empty rooms don't fit with burial practices, and texts like the Inventory Stela and Dream Stela talk about repairing, not building. Underneath the plateau, a system of tunnels and empty spaces suggests an older use. Meanwhile, robots find sealed doors that no one is permitted to open, and a scroll that talks about pyramids before language disappears in a fire. Every new discovery and every strange thing is treated in the same way. It is dismissed, denied, or completely erased. This is not happening by chance. It is a pattern, a planned attempt to manage what we understand about Giza. And it brings up a scary question. What truth is so threatening that it needs to be concealed no matter what? The center of this cover-up is Egyptology itself, a field based on careful study, but also on stories that do not change. The accepted history puts the Great Pyramid and Sphinx in the 4th dynasty, around 2580 BCE, built by Khufu and Khafre with copper tools and human strength. This story is simple, makes sense, and is reassuring. It matches our idea of human development, a slow and steady improvement from simple to complex. But when proof goes against this history, it is met not with interest but with opposition. The Inventory Stela, which suggests Khufu repaired the Sphinx, is kept in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, hardly ever shown and called a late-period advertisement from the 26th dynasty. The dream stele, which tells the story of Thutmose IV's meeting with a god, is called a political legend, and its meanings are ignored. The water damage on the Sphinx, which points to a time 7,000 years ago, is explained away as being caused by wind or groundwater, even though geological proof says otherwise. Why does every unusual find get treated the same way, being buried, called untrue or forgotten? This pattern of dismissal is what experts call intellectual gatekeeping. Egyptology, just like any field of study, protects its basic beliefs very strongly. The history of the Old Kingdom is a main pillar, built on many years of research, carbon dating, and objects like the Diary of Murr, which talks about moving limestone for Khufu's pyramid. To agree that Giza's monuments might be older than Egypt, or that they were made by a lost civilization with advanced knowledge, would tear down this pillar. It would mean rewriting not only Egyptian history, but all of human history, suggesting that advanced societies were around thousands of years before we believed was possible. Such a change would put careers, reputations, and the power of organizations like the Supreme Council of Antiquities, which is in charge of Egypt's archaeological sites, at risk. The stakes are very high, not just for science but for control. Think about how the underground system beneath Giza has been handled. In 2008, ground-penetrating radar showed a complicated network of rooms, tunnels, and empty spaces, and some of them matched reports from the 19th century by explorers like Wallace Budge and Napoleon's team. These areas, with their straight cuts and geometric shapes, suggest a use other than tombs, maybe as a foundation for a civilization we do not know. Yet the Egyptian government stated, there is nothing there. Pictures of carved tunnels, radar scans showing man-made empty spaces, and old maps were ignored or hidden. Access was taken away, researchers were sent home, and the discoveries were removed from public conversation. This is similar to earlier events. A dig in the 1930s under the Sphinx found a room, but it was filled back in without being studied. Rudolf Gantenbrink's robot Upuaut 2 was stopped after it found a sealed door in 1993. The Pyramid rover's 2002 discovery of another door did not lead to any more exploration. Every time, the door to new knowledge is slammed shut. This is not just about keeping artifacts safe from harm. The Supreme Council of Antiquities, with the support of the Egyptian government, controls who can visit Giza with very strict rules. Digs need permissions, money, and official agreement, which are often connected to political and money-related matters. Tourism is very important to Egypt's economy, and the story of Giza as a pharaonic creation brings in millions of tourists every year. A story about a lost civilization of pyramids that came before Egypt could mess up this business, making people question the country's cultural history. But the conspiracy is even bigger. Some people guess that worldwide groups like UNESCO, which gives money to and makes rules for archaeological sites, have a strong reason to keep things as they are. A discovery that changes history could shake up not just Egyptology, but our whole idea of human development, questioning the straight-line story of how civilization grew. And then there is an even stranger idea, one that is whispered about by those who speculate. Could the cover-up involve powers that are not just academic or governmental? The perfection of the Great Pyramid, its alignment with Orion's belt, its inclusion of mathematical numbers like pi and phi, are all strange things that have led to theories of alien involvement, made popular by writers like Erich von Däniken. If Giza's monuments were built with knowledge from another world, or if the underground rooms have proof of advanced technology, showing them could change more than just history books. It could challenge our position in the universe, suggesting we have had contact with beings we are not ready to accept. While this idea is a stretch, it shows how high the stakes are. A truth that changes our understanding of humanity's past might be too disruptive to be let out into the open. The pattern of erasing history goes beyond Giza. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets that described civilizations before a great flood were called myths until digs like Göbekli Tepe, which is 12,000 years old, proved they were real. In Mesoamerica, the Mayan books were burned by Spanish conquerors, wiping out knowledge that might have been as advanced as European science. The Coptic scroll that described pyramids before language fits this pattern, a text that could have destroyed Egyptology, but was lost in a fire that happened at a very suspicious time. These events, happening over hundreds of years and across different parts of the world, suggest a planned effort to control what we know about where we come from. It is not about destroying every piece of evidence, but about managing information, making sure that only the approved story gets told. The Inventory Stela is hidden in a museum, the underground rooms are sealed, and the robots are stopped, with each action being another brick in a wall of silence. This conspiracy of hiding things is not just about power. It is about being afraid. If Giza's monuments were built by a civilization before Egypt, one that knew about astronomy, mathematics, and engineering far beyond what we thought was possible, it makes us face how weak our own story is. The pharaohs, who were seen as living gods, become just people who took care of things. Their godly power becomes something they borrowed. The timeline of human development, which was so carefully put together, becomes a lie, showing empty spaces where advanced societies might have existed and then disappeared, their accomplishments buried by disaster or by purpose. The groups that protect Giza, like Egypt's government, global organizations, and even the world of scholars, might be afraid not just of the truth, but of what it means, that we are not the highest point of history, but just a part of a cycle of forgetting and finding again. As you begin to fall asleep, imagine yourself standing in front of the Great Pyramid, its stones shining under the stars, its secrets hidden in rooms and scrolls we will never be able to see. The conspiracy of hiding is not one single event, but a shadow that has been cast over hundreds of years, a refusal to let certain truths be known. The steles, the tunnels, the doors, and the burned manuscript all point to a Giza that belongs to a time before Egypt, a time we are not meant to know about. The gatekeepers may lock the doors, but the stones still speak in whispers, and their voices get louder in the quiet of the night, pushing us to ask, what are they so scared we will discover? We face the very center of the puzzle. The technology used to build the Great Pyramid. It is a wonder of such amazing skill that it questions everything we think we know about the abilities of ancient people. Was this accomplished with copper tools and human strength, or was it something much more advanced than we can comprehend? Lie back, let the quiet sounds of the desert be all around you, and listen as we look into a technology that seems to come from another time. The inner tunnels, the descending passage, the grand gallery, and the king's chamber are all built with such perfection that the joints cannot be seen. The angles are perfectly straight, and the structure has remained strong for 4,500 years. We are told this was done by the 4th dynasty of Pharaoh Khufu, around 2580 BCE, using ropes, ramps, and copper chisels. But the more we examine it, the less believable this reason seems, as if the pyramid was constructed with tools and knowledge that we cannot figure out, tools that feel like they do not belong to the time we think they came from. Think about how huge the job was. The Great Pyramid has enough stone to construct a wall around a small nation, with blocks that were cut from quarries sometimes located hundreds of miles away. The granite in the king's chamber, which came from Aswan, 800 kilometers to the south, was cut with a skill that leaves no space for even a thin piece of paper. Modern tests have shown that copper tools, which were the best the Egyptians had, have a hard time cutting limestone and an even harder time with granite, which is one of the toughest stones there is. To get the pyramid's flat surfaces and perfectly fitting joints, workers would have needed tools that were incredibly strong, like bronze or iron, but neither of those were used much during the Old Kingdom. The planning is also very hard to believe. Moving a 15-ton block over the desert, lifting it hundreds of feet up, and putting it in place with extreme accuracy would be a challenge for today's cranes and lasers. Yet, we are told that this was done with sleds, rollers, and human power, guided by the stars and water levels. The amazing exactness of how the pyramid is lined up makes us ask even more questions. Its bottom is pointed toward the main directions of a compass, with a mistake of only 0.05 degrees, a success that would need very smart mapping skills. People who build today, even with GPS and special satellite tools, have a hard time being that accurate on something so big. The people of Egypt did not have compasses or special viewing tools. Still, they lined up a giant 13-acre building to the true north almost perfectly. The bottom of the pyramid is so flat that the difference in height from one side to the other is only 2.1 centimeters, which shows they were experts at shaping land, even on the bumpy rock it was built on. To make a base like that, workers would have had to check and make flat huge spaces with tools that we have never found. They would have had to guide hundreds of workers with an exactness that is as good as modern computer programs for building. The tunnels inside, like the Grand Gallery with its special overlapping roof, spread out the weight of millions of tons of stone so well that the building has survived earthquakes and attacks without getting hurt. This was not built by just trying things out. It is the work of a brilliant mind that knew about physics, shapes, and how materials work at a level we think of as modern. It is not only how it was built that seems like it is from another world. The plan of the pyramid includes knowledge that seems like it should not have been known back then. The small tunnels in the king's room, which are thin and hard to get to, point to the stars of Orion's belt and the North Star as they were in the sky around the year 2450 BCE. This would mean they had to understand how stars move, and a very long 25,920-year pattern in the Earth's wobble. The Egyptians did watch the stars to know when the Nile River would flood, but none of their writing says they could figure out such long-term star patterns. The pyramid's sizes hold secret math numbers. If you divide the distance around the bottom by its height, you get a number very close to 2 times pi. The angle of its sides has the golden ratio, phi, hidden in it. These numbers, which are correct to tiny fractions of a percent, show they knew about difficult math that is not written in Egyptian records, which were mostly about simple shapes for measuring land, not about numbers that are true everywhere. Even more surprising, if you multiply the pyramid's height by 43,200, you get a number very close to the Earth's radius from top to bottom, and if you multiply the distance around the base by that same number, it equals the distance around the Earth's middle. This special number, which is connected to the long star pattern, suggests they knew the planet's shape and size, which were ideas not proven until many hundreds of years later. This high level of smarts brings up a wild question. Could the Great Pyramid have been made with a technology that we have lost, or maybe one we have never figured out? The tools and ways of building that are said to have been used by the Egyptians, like copper chisels and wooden ramps, do not fully explain how exact the pyramid is. Some people who study it suggest other ways, like using sound to lift things or special cutting tools, but there is no real proof for these ideas. In old writings from other places, we can find hints of things like this. The Sumerian story Enuma Elish tells of gods shaping the world with tools of heavenly power. Also, Indian books like the Mahabharata talk about machines that could move stones with sound or light. Is it possible the pyramid's builders used similar ways that were forgotten when their people disappeared? The fact that there are no tool marks on the pyramid's stones, especially on the smooth granite inside the king's room, points to a technology that could shape stone more finely than chisels, maybe with sand-like polishers, super-sharp saws, or something we do not have a name for yet. This thought is similar to what we see at other old places. At Stonehenge, which is 5,000 years old, giant sarsen stones were carried for dozens of miles and set up to line up with the longest and shortest days of the year, which needed building skills we have trouble explaining. In Peru, the stone walls of Machu Picchu, made by the Inca people, have blocks that fit so perfectly together that they seem to beat gravity with no glue and no marks from tools. The giant trilithons at Baalbek in Lebanon, weighing as much as 800 tons, were cut and moved into place with a skill that our best cranes today would find hard to match. The most amazing of all is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a 12,000-year-old place with huge carved pillars, some weighing 20 tons, that was built before farming or writing existed. These places, just like Giza, make it seem like there was a worldwide knowledge of amazing building, a skill that showed up all of a sudden and then disappeared just as fast. Could the Great Pyramid be a piece of this puzzle? A leftover from a group of people that lived all over the world, leaving their signs in stone before they vanished. The most exciting theory goes even one step more, hinting at help from outer space. Writers like Erich von Däniken believe that the pyramid's exactness, its star alignments, and its math secrets point to alien builders or helpers who gave smart technology to early people. This idea is not mainstream, but it becomes more popular because of the pyramid's odd features. How could people with no written knowledge of advanced math or star patterns do such amazing things? The lack of writing inside, the empty rooms, and the star alignments could all be signs of a goal that was not about human pride, but about a message for the stars. Even though it is a guess, this theory shows the big gap between what we see and what we can explain, making us think about ideas beyond what we know now. A more realistic idea is that the pyramid was an amazing piece of technology made to keep knowledge safe through a big disaster. Its quietness, with no hieroglyphs or claims by kings, points to a design that was for everyone, meant for any group of people that could figure out its measurements. The special numbers hidden in its shape, pi, phi, and the Earth's sizes, are everlasting, staying true even when languages and cultures disappear. Unlike paper or clay which fall apart, stone lasts a very long time, and the pyramid's strength shows it was made to last through ages, not just for the time kings ruled. Is it possible its builders knew a disaster was coming, like a flood, a change in weather, or the end of their society, and they built a monument to protect what they knew? The time when Africa was wet and green ended around 4000 BCE, turning the Sahara from a beautiful green land into a desert and forcing people to move. If the pyramid is older than this change, as the wearing away of the Sphinx suggests, it might be a signal from a lost world, made to lead future people back to the truths they left for us. Imagine the Great Pyramid under a sky full of stars. Its stones are quiet but seem full of a reason for being there. Its technology, whether it came from humans, gods, or beings from another world, communicates through its perfect shape, not through writing, a language of angles and positions that lasts longer than any kingdom. The builders, no matter who they were, did not leave their names, only a puzzle for us to measure, to ask about, and to be amazed by. Tonight, we follow a story that has fascinated people for thousands of years, a tale of Atlantis, a lost land of amazing wisdom, which is said to have disappeared in just one night. The tale of Atlantis starts with Plato, a philosopher from Greece, who wrote about it in his books around the year 360 BCE. He told of a powerful group of people who lived 9,000 years before his own time. Found past the Pillars of Hercules, which is likely the Strait of Gibraltar, Atlantis was a wonder of building, creating, and art. Its people were experts at sailing, watching the stars, and using technology. Their island, full of good things, had ring-shaped canals, huge temples, and shiny stone palaces. But their pride made the gods angry, and in just one day and night, earthquakes and floods pulled Atlantis into the sea, leaving nothing behind but a story told from one person to the next. Plato's story, which many people think is just a fable, has started to guess for hundreds of years. Could this lost group of people be the answer to Giza's puzzles? Are its structures the leftovers of a world that was gone long before Egypt began? The Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, with their strange features, fit this story in a spooky way. The water damage on the Sphinx, as suggested by geologist Robert Schoch, points to a period 7,000 to 10,000 years in the past, when a lot of rain fell on a green Sahara. This matches Plato's timeline for Atlantis, putting its destruction around 9,600 BCE, at the end of the time when Africa was wet and green, when changes in weather turned green lands into desert. The pyramid's hidden math numbers, pi, phi, and the Earth's sizes, hint at a knowledge of star watching and shapes that is much more advanced than what we believe the Fourth Dynasty had. Its perfectness, with a base that is flat to within 2.1 centimeters and pointed to the true north within 0.05 degrees, suggests a technology that is beyond what copper tools and human work could do. Could these structures be the work of people who escaped Atlantis as it was sinking to create a long-lasting monument on the banks of the Nile? The idea is not as crazy as it might sound when we look at places other than Egypt. All around the globe, ancient places give clues about a missing part of human history. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is from 9600 BCE, has giant stone pillars, some weighing 20 tons, with detailed carvings that are lined up with things in the sky. Built before farming or writing, it makes us rethink our idea that people from long ago were simple. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, which is underwater off the coast, has steps and corners that seem to have been made by people from a time when the ocean was lower, maybe 10,000 years ago. In Bolivia, the stone blocks at Pumapunku, cut with amazing straightness, cannot be explained by the tools the Inca people had. These places, just like Giza, have one thing in common. They show up suddenly, perfectly made, with no earlier versions, as if they were based on a knowledge that disappeared with the people who had it. Could Atlantis, or a group of people like them, have been the source? Did their ideas spread across the world before a huge disaster destroyed their home? The Giza Plateau has clues that support this idea. The system of tunnels under the pyramids and the Sphinx, which was found with radar in 2008, shows rooms and passages that are too perfectly made to be natural, suggesting a structure that is older than the pharaohs. The Osiris shaft, with its empty stone box and weird sound qualities, seems less like a grave and more like a leftover from a time with a purpose we cannot figure out. A Coptic scroll, which was lost in a fire, told of stone beacons that were built before there was writing, a description that is like Plato's story of the amazing buildings in Atlantis. The Inventory Stela and Dream Stela show Khufu and Thutmose IV as people who fixed things, not as builders, as if Giza's structures were passed down from a time before Egypt. Altogether, these clues give us a picture of a group of people who left their mark in stone, knowing that their world was disappearing and that their knowledge could be forgotten. But what kind of people could do this? Plato described Atlantis as a place with smart engineers who could build ports, canals, and temples that were as amazing as the wonders of Greece. If the Great Pyramid was their creation, its construction, with 2.3 million blocks, some weighing 15 tons, put in place with tiny bit accuracy, suggests they were masters of planning, math, and materials. The pyramid's alignment with Orion's belt and the North Star, connected to the 25,920-year cycle of the stars, points to an understanding of the sky that is not found in Egypt's records. The fact that there are no hieroglyphs, which is very different from Egyptian tombs, could mean it was a culture that cared more about universal signs, like shapes and numbers, than about languages that change over time. Atlantis, or a similar group of people, might have built Giza as a time capsule, putting knowledge into stone to survive a disaster they saw coming, whether it was a flood, earthquake, or change in weather. This leads us to the story of the Hall of Records, an idea made popular by the psychic Edgar Cayce in the early 1900s. Cayce said that under the Sphinx there is a room that holds the wisdom of Atlantis, books, tools, and maybe technologies that could change what we know about our past. Radar scans in the 1980s and 2000s found empty spaces under the Sphinx and pyramids, which supports the idea of hidden rooms. The sealed doors that robots found in the Great Pyramid's shafts, one in 1993 by Upuaut 2 and another in 2002 by the Pyramid rover, could open into such a room. The copper pins on the first door, which were symbols of divine power, might show the entrance to this library, meant only for people who are ready to understand what is inside. The Egyptian government's refusal to look into these spaces, saying they are nothing, makes people guess that they know or are scared of what is in there. The Atlantis idea also fits with a larger pattern of lost civilizations. In Sumerian writings, the Enuma Elish talks about a world before a great flood that was shaped by gods with divine tools. The Hindu Mahabharata describes ancient cities with technologies that sound like they are from a science fiction story. These myths from different cultures all have a similar story, a golden time of knowledge that ended with a disaster, leaving only pieces in stone or stories. The end of the time when Africa was wet and green around 4000 BCE turned the Sahara into a desert, pushing people to the Nile River, where Egypt would later grow. If Atlantis was real, its survivors might have brought their knowledge to Giza, building monuments to save what their island could not. The Sphinx's water damage, the pyramid's codes, and the underground tunnels could all be what they left behind, a message to future people that their world once existed. Still, the quietness around these ideas is very loud. The Egyptian government, with support from groups like UNESCO, has tight control over digging at Giza. New findings that go against the 4th Dynasty timeline, radar scans, robot findings, old writings, are either ignored or hidden. This pattern of hiding things, as we have talked about, hints at a fear not of old objects but of ideas. If Giza was built by a lost civilization, it would mean the pharaohs were not the creators of their greatest wonders, but people who inherited them, taking credit for something they could not copy. It would make us change our ideas about human history, making us admit that advanced societies grew and fell long before our written history starts. The legend of Atlantis, whether real or a story, represents this fear, a reminder that our history might be a circle of forgetting, not a straight path to greatness. Picture the lost shores of Atlantis, its temples sinking under the water, its people spreading out to build one last great monument under the stars of Egypt. The Great Pyramid and the Sphinx are their echo, quiet but lasting, their secrets hidden in stone and sand. The story of Atlantis is more than just a tale. It is a question that asks us to look past the pharaohs, past our timelines, to a civilization that left its mark not to be famous, but to make sure we never forget what we have lost. The Great Pyramid of Giza is an amazing structure made of stone. Its 2.3 million blocks are a sign of exactness that seems impossible with old tools. But it is not only the part of the building we can see that is amazing. It is also the unseen, the way sound travels inside its rooms, as if the builders knew things about sound that we are just starting to understand. Go into the king's chamber, the granite center of the pyramid, and you will notice it. It is a place where quiet sounds stay for a long time, where certain musical notes seem to make the air shake. The room, made from huge granite blocks brought from Aswan, 800 kilometers away, is a box with perfect measurements, 10 meters long, 5 meters wide, and 5.8 meters high. Its walls are put together so perfectly that you cannot fit a knife between them. This creates a sound environment that is not like any other in Egypt. If you speak quietly, your voice can be heard with amazing clearness. If you make a low humming sound, the stone itself seems to hum back, as if it were made to match a sound that is part of its design. This is not just in your head, it can be measured. People who study sound, including sound engineers, have looked at the king's chamber and discovered that its sizes match special sound-making ratios, which creates a vibration that makes certain sounds louder. A sound at about 110 Hz, for instance, makes a wave that stays in place, a vibration that you can almost feel as if the room was built to catch and boost sound. The granite, which has a lot of quartz in it, is a natural carrier of vibrations. Its crystal-like structure can vibrate like a tuning fork. When it is hit, or when certain sounds are made near it, the stone shakes, holding notes in a way that seems planned. This is not the messy echo of a cave or a tomb. It is a carefully controlled sound space made to handle sound with a skill that is as good as modern concert halls. This special quality is not just in the king's chamber. Far below the Giza plateau, in the Osiris shaft near Khufu's causeway, another sound mystery is waiting. This tunnel goes straight down for over 30 meters into the solid rock and ends in a room with 6 small side rooms and a stone box that has no signs of a burial. Here, too, sound acts in a strange way. Whispers travel across the room with amazing clarity, but louder noises seem to be softened, soaked up by the stone. Sound tests show that the room vibrates at low sound levels, around 100 to 120 Hz, making a feeling that some people say is like being in a trance, as if the space was made to change how you feel. The smooth walls, carved with the same kind of tool marks, make this effect stronger, suggesting that the builders knew how sound works with stone. This is not a tomb. It is a room made to make music, to hold vibrations that link the seen and the unseen. What could this be for? In ancient Egypt, sound was very important, connected to how the world was made and to the gods. The god Thoth, who was the master of knowledge, was believed to have created the world by speaking. Priests used chanting, music, and instruments to talk with the gods. But the sound qualities of the Great Pyramid and the Osiris shaft are more than just for ceremonies. They point to a technology of sound, a deep understanding of physics that could use vibrations for things we cannot completely figure out. Some researchers have suggested that the king's chamber was a special room made to make certain sounds louder for spiritual or real-world purposes. The low hum of 110 Hz, for example, is known to make people feel calm or to enter different states of mind, something that is studied in brain science today. Could the pyramid's builders have used sound to affect the mind, to connect with powers in the universe, or even to control energy? This idea is found in other old cultures too. In Malta, the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a 5,000-year-old underground temple, has rooms that are made to vibrate at 110-111 Hz, creating effects that some think were for ceremonies or healing. In Peru, the stone hallways of Chavín de Huántar make low-frequency sounds louder, helping priests find their way through dark tunnels with sound signals. These places, like Giza, suggest a worldwide knowledge of sound engineering, where sound was not just for art, but was a technology used to change experiences or the environment. The granite of the Great Pyramid with its quartz could work as a material that creates a little bit of electricity when it vibrates. Although it is just a theory, this fits with ideas from Nikola Tesla, who thought that old buildings could gather the Earth's natural energy through vibrations. Could the pyramid be a machine not made of gears, but of sound waves, built to use forces we have forgotten how to control? The meaning of this is huge. If the pyramid and its underground rooms were made for sound vibrations, they might have a purpose beyond just being symbols. Some researchers, like engineer Christopher Dunn, say that the Great Pyramid was a machine that made power, using sound or vibration to create energy. The king's chamber, with its granite and exact sizes, could focus sound waves, maybe to charge things, affect materials, or even send messages over long distances. The air shafts that point to stars might have been used not for air, but for energy, linking the pyramid to the rhythms of the universe. While there is no solid proof for this, the room's sound qualities and the pyramid's exactness, pointing to the true north, holding the secrets of pi and phi, show a knowledge of physics that is beyond what the Egyptians wrote down. The Osiris shaft, with its similar sound qualities, could be a part of this system, an underground partner made to vibrate together with the pyramid above. This brings us to a bigger question. Who knew all of this? The Egyptians of the 4th dynasty were good builders, but their writings do not show that they understood advanced sound engineering or piezoelectric effects. Their tools, copper chisels and wooden levers, could not have made the perfectly smooth granite surfaces of the king's chamber. The fact that there are no hieroglyphs in the pyramid, which is so different from other Egyptian tombs, suggests a purpose that was not related to their religion. Could this technology have come from a lost civilization, one that saw sound as a powerful force, not just for ceremonies? The Coptic scroll, which was burned before it could be read, talked about stone beacons built before writing existed, hinting at a people who left their mark in Giza. The water damage on the Sphinx, which dates back 7,000 years, supports this, as does the underground system, with its perfectly made rooms suggesting a forgotten structure. The sound vibrations of Giza also connect to the story of Atlantis, which Plato described as a civilization of smart engineers. If Atlantis was real, its survivors might have brought what they knew to the Nile, building monuments to keep their science safe from a coming disaster. The sound qualities of the pyramid and the Osiris shaft could be leftovers of this technology, made to use sound for things we cannot imagine, maybe for healing, communication, or making energy. The pattern of hiding things that we have found, sealed tunnels, silenced robots, burned scrolls, suggests that people in charge today are afraid of this truth. The Egyptian government, with support from groups like UNESCO, limits who can go to Giza's important sites. Could they be hiding proof of an ancient technology that is too strong or too strange to show? This fear of revealing the truth is not just in Egypt. In India, the ancient city of Dwarka, which is now underwater, is said to have buildings with advanced engineering. But digging there is limited. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform writings hint at divine weapons that controlled sound or light, which are just seen as myths. The conspiracy of silence, as we have talked about, protects Giza's secrets with locked gates and official no's. If the pyramid's sound qualities were part of a technology from a lost civilization, showing them could change our view of human history, suggesting that we are not the first to have mastered such forces. Some even guess it came from outer space, as Erich von Däniken suggested, pointing to the pyramid's exactness as proof of alien help. Although it is a fringe idea, it highlights the mystery. The technology of Giza seems to be beyond humans, beyond ancient times, and beyond us. Could the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx be the creations of beings from outer space, visitors from the stars who left their sign in stone? The Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a monument to what seems impossible. The rooms inside, like the king's chamber, are made with granite brought from 800 kilometers away, fitted together so perfectly that you cannot slide a knife between the stones. The air shafts are aimed at Orion's belt and the North Star as they were in the sky in 2450 BCE, which suggests a knowledge of star movements that is not found in Egypt's records. The pyramid hides special math numbers like pi and phi, and its measurements copy the Earth's size from top to bottom and around the middle, in ways that hint at an understanding of shapes and star watching that was not written down in the Fourth Dynasty. The Sphinx, with its water damage from 7,000 years ago, suggests it is even older. These strange facts make the story of copper tools and human workers hard to believe. Could they be pointing to a source that is not from Earth, a civilization from the universe that created Giza's wonders? This idea, as wild as it seems, was made famous by Erich von Däniken in his 1968 book, Chariots of the Gods. Von Däniken said that ancient monuments like the Great Pyramid could only be explained by help from outer space. He claimed that the perfection of Giza's construction needed technology that was much more advanced than what humans had 4,500 years ago. Moving 15-ton blocks, lining up buildings with stars and planets, and hiding universal numbers in the design, these accomplishments suggest tools or knowledge not found in Egyptian writings. The fact that there are no hieroglyphs in the pyramid, unlike every other royal tomb, makes it even more mysterious. Why would someone build such a monument and not claim it, not tell a story, unless the builders were not from this planet, and their goal was not about human greatness? Von Däniken suggested that aliens came to Earth, shared their technology with early humans, or built these structures as signals, stargazing spots, or even places for their ships to land. The proof, though just a guess, is powerful when you look at it this way. The Great Pyramid's alignment to the true north with only a tiny error requires a worldwide view, a knowledge of the Earth's axis and magnetic field, ideas that were not recorded in ancient Egypt. The airshaft's star alignments, aimed at Orion and the North Star, suggest a deep interest in the cosmos, as if the pyramid was a link between Earth and the sky. In Egyptian stories, Orion was connected to Osiris, the god of new life. But the exactness of these alignments points to a scientific understanding, not just a religious belief. The pyramid's mathematical secrets, its perimeter giving the number 2 pi when divided by its height, its slope hiding the golden ratio, point to a language everyone can understand, one that might be understood by beings who travel among the stars. The lack of writing, so different from Egypt's talkative tombs, could mean the builders spoke through shapes, a language that works on any planet. Besides Giza, other ancient places support this idea. In Peru, the Nazca lines, huge drawings on the ground that can only be seen from the air, stretch across the desert. No one knows what they are for. Were they signals to visitors from the sky, as von Däniken suggested? In Bolivia, the stone blocks at Pumapunku are cut with a precision that Inca tools cannot explain and seem to come from a technology we cannot figure out. The giant stones of Baalbek, Lebanon, which weigh up to 800 tons, are a challenge for human building skills even now. These sites, like Giza, share a common feature. They appear suddenly, with no clear signs of the technology developing over time, as if they were a gift from a source beyond Earth. The Sumerian Anunnaki, gods who were said to come from the sky, are described in old texts as teachers of civilization. Could they, or beings like them, have helped with the building of Giza, leaving monuments as proof that they were there? The network of tunnels under Giza adds another piece to the puzzle. Radar scans in 2008 showed rooms and tunnels, some with perfect geometric shapes, suggesting a structure older than the pharaohs. The Osiris shaft, with its empty stone box and strange acoustics, vibrates at frequencies that change how one feels, hinting at a purpose related to sound or energy. Could these spaces be leftovers of alien technology made for communication, energy creation, or even signaling to other stars? The sealed doors in the pyramid's shafts, found by robots in 1993 and 2002, have copper pins, metals that were special to Egyptian gods connected with divine power. Were these signs for a technology we cannot understand, left by beings who knew their creations would last longer than their visit? This leads us to the most daring question: why is everyone so quiet? the Egyptian authorities, through the Supreme Council of Antiquities, have repeatedly stopped the exploration of Giza's hidden areas. Strange radar readings under the Sphinx, robot finds in the pyramid, and old reports of underground rooms are all dismissed as nothing. This pattern of hiding things, as we have seen, suggests a fear of what might be discovered. If Giza's monuments were built by aliens or with their help, revealing this could turn our understanding of human history upside down. It would mean we are not alone, that our greatest accomplishments might have been borrowed from the stars. Groups like UNESCO, which looks after historical sites, and world governments might be afraid of the mess such a discovery could cause, not just for science, but for religion, culture, and our idea of who we are. The conspiracy gets bigger when we look at the wider picture. Old writings from different cultures hint at beings from the sky. The Hindu Vimanas, flying machines in the Mahabharata, describe air battles with advanced technology. The Book of Enoch, a religious text not in the main Bible, talks about watchers who came down from the heavens and taught humans forbidden knowledge. The Dogon people of Mali, with their specific knowledge of the Sirius star system, say it came from fish-like beings from the stars. These stories, often called myths, share a common idea: contact with advanced beings who shaped early human societies. Giza's strange features, its exactness, its cosmic alignments, its silence, fit this story, suggesting a link to a cosmic mind that left its mark and then went away. But if aliens built or helped build Giza, why leave such monuments? What was their goal? The pyramid's durability, having survived 4,500 years of earthquakes and attacks, suggests it was designed to last for a very long time. Its mathematical codes, pi, phi, and the Earth's dimensions, are understood everywhere, meant for any society advanced enough to measure them. Could it be a beacon, signaling to future visitors or to humans when we are ready? The Sphinx, looking at the sunrise on the first day of spring, might mark a meeting point in the cosmos, its water-damaged stone being a testament to its old age. The underground rooms, sealed and quiet, could hold technology or records waiting for a time when we are prepared to understand. The pattern of hiding things, burned scrolls, locked tunnels, stopped robots, implies that some people, maybe even modern governments, know more than they say they do. The rooms inside, the king's chamber, the grand gallery, and the underground passages, are built with granite and limestone fitted so perfectly that you cannot slide a knife between them. The air shafts are aimed at stars like Orion's belt. The numbers in its measurements hide pi and phi, and its sizes reflect the Earth's radius from top to bottom and the distance around its middle. We are told this was the tomb of Khufu, built around 2580 BCE, but the fact that there are no hieroglyphs, no burial items, and no mummy makes that story hard to believe. The pyramid's quietness, its alignments with the stars, and its long-lasting strength suggest a purpose much bigger than a pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. What if the pyramid was never intended to praise the dead, but to protect knowledge for the living, for a future that might forget everything else? This idea changes the pyramid from a monument into a machine, not one with gears or wires, but one made of shapes and strength. Its design is too exact, too universal to be for just one king or one time period. The special numbers it holds, pi, phi, and the Earth's dimensions, are timeless, not depending on language, culture, or what people believe. Unlike paper scrolls or clay tablets, which break apart or become impossible to read, stone lasts. Unlike hieroglyphs, which need a special key like the Rosetta Stone to understand, mathematics can be understood by any civilization with the tools to measure. The pyramid's silence, its lack of writing, is not a mistake but a plan, a way to make sure its message survives when empires fall, languages are lost, and gods are forgotten. It is a storage place, a safe for knowledge meant to outlast any disaster and lead a future world back to truths it might have lost. The pyramid's mathematical secrets are the key to this purpose. If you divide its perimeter, 921.6 meters, by its height, 146.6 meters, you get 6.2857, which is within 0.1% of being 2 times pi. The slope of its sides, at 51.84 degrees, contains the golden ratio, phi, a number admired in many cultures for its beauty. If you multiply the height by 43,200, you get a number very close to the Earth's polar radius. If you multiply the perimeter by the same number, you match the distance around the Earth's equator. This number, 43,200, is not random. It is connected to the precession of the equinoxes, a 25,920-year cycle in the Earth's wobble, a thing that would need hundreds of years of watching to even notice. These numbers are not the result of trying things out, but of careful planning, a language of numbers that lasts through time. Whoever built the pyramid knew that pi and phi would always be true, that the Earth's shape would last, and that the stars would move but always come back. They built a structure to keep these truths safe, not just for Egypt, but for anyone who might come later. This idea of a place to store knowledge can be seen in other ancient sites. Stonehenge, built around 2500 BCE, lines up with the solstices, putting star cycles into its stones. The giant stones of Baalbek, Lebanon, some weighing 800 tons, suggest a reason beyond just building. Their exactness hints at a lost science. The underwater structures of Yonaguni off the coast of Japan, possibly 10,000 years old, have steps that do not look natural, as if they were built to survive rising oceans. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, from 9600 BCE, with its carved pillars lined up with stars, was made before farming and writing, yet it shows a level of skill we cannot explain. These sites, like Giza, feel like anchors in time, built to survive disasters that wiped out their makers. The Great Pyramid, with its cosmic alignments and mathematical perfection, could be the greatest of these, a time capsule made for a world recovering from a collapse. What kind of collapse? The time when Africa was wet and green, which ended around 4000 BCE, turned the Sahara from a green paradise into a desert, pushing people to the Nile, where Egypt would later begin. Records in the earth show floods, changes in weather, and big events that could have destroyed whole civilizations. Plato's story of Atlantis, a society swallowed by the sea 9,000 years before his time, might be a memory of such a disaster. If the pyramid's builders, whether they were from Atlantis, from space, or a lost human culture, saw this coming, they might have built Giza as a safety measure, a way to keep their knowledge safe through the chaos. The pyramid's strength, surviving earthquakes, invasions, and 4,500 years, proves it was built to last through geological ages, not just the reigns of kings. Its silence, with no hieroglyphs and no royal names, makes sure its message is for everyone, meant for any civilization in any time that can measure its truths. The pyramid's sound qualities, as we have talked about, make this purpose even deeper. The king's chamber vibrates at frequencies like 110 Hz, which can make people feel calm or enter different states of mind, while the Osiris shaft below makes whispers louder in strange ways. These features suggest a technology of sound, maybe used to connect with cosmic forces or to keep knowledge safe through vibrations. Could the pyramid be a machine for memory, its rooms tuned to frequencies that store information in ways we do not yet understand? Nikola Tesla, who studied vibrations and energy, thought that ancient structures could use the Earth's natural forces. The pyramid's granite, with its high quartz content, might act as a piezoelectric conductor, creating small electric charges when it vibrates. This speculative idea fits with the pyramid's design, its exactness, its alignments, its silence, suggesting a purpose beyond ceremony, a technology made to last. This brings us to a troubling question. Why hide this knowledge? The pattern of secrecy we have found, sealed tunnels, stopped robots, burned scrolls, suggests a planned effort to keep Giza's secrets hidden. The Egyptian authorities, supported by groups like UNESCO, limit access to important sites, calling radar oddities and robot finds nothing. If the pyramid is a storage place for future generations, why stop people from exploring it? Maybe the truth it holds, about a lost civilization, advanced technology, or even visitors from other planets, is too shocking. It would challenge the story of Egypt as the birthplace of Giza's wonders, suggesting the pharaohs were just guardians, not creators. It would force us to admit that human history is not a steady upward climb, but a cycle of rising and falling, with knowledge gained and lost over thousands of years. The conspiracy of silence goes beyond Egypt. In Central America, Mayan books were burned by conquerors, wiping out knowledge that might have been as advanced as European science. In Mesopotamia, texts hinting at civilizations before a great flood were called myths until places like Göbekli Tepe proved they were real. The Great Pyramid, with its universal codes, might be a safeguard against such losses, a monument built to outlast forgetting. Its builders, whether human or not, chose stone over words and shapes over language, knowing that civilizations disappear, but numbers last forever. The pyramid is a starting point, a beacon for a future that might need to rediscover pi, phi, or the Earth's place in the universe, a lesson carved for a world starting over from nothing. So far, we have traveled together across the Giza plateau, standing before the Sphinx with its water-worn marks that speak of reigns from long ago, and following the Great Pyramid's cosmic codes that hold the very secrets of the universe. We have wondered about its silent rooms, empty of any pharaoh's body, and found tablets that describe Khufu and Thutmose IV not as builders, but as simple fixers of something much older. We have gone down into the secret tunnels under Giza, followed robots to sealed doors that hide unspoken secrets, and felt sad for a Coptic scroll lost to fire before its words could change our past. We have untangled a web of silence created by people in power, looked into the legend of Atlantis as a possible home for these wonders, and even thought about hands from other planets shaping the stones. We have listened to the pyramid's vibrating hum, a song of ancient physics that hints at technologies we cannot even imagine. Now, as the desert night gets darker and the stars turn in the sky in their endless dance, we come to the end, a moment to bring all these ideas together into a picture that shows the true shape of Giza's mystery. It is not a shape of kings or gods, not a monument to greatness or death. It is the shape that memory has lost, a form carved in stone to fight against being forgotten itself. It is a storage place made not for the past, but for the future. The Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, and the whole area stand as a quiet library, a safe for knowledge built to survive the end of worlds, waiting for a time when humans might need to remember what they have lost. Close your eyes, let the soft sound of my voice guide you, and let this final story open up like the sky at sunrise, showing the light in the darkness. From the very start, the clues have pointed to a truth that is bigger than Egypt's pharaohs. The Sphinx, with its erosion marks made by rains that fell 7,000 years ago, is older than the dry desert we know today, suggesting it was built by someone from a greener, forgotten time. The Great Pyramid, with its base lined up to true north with unbelievable exactness, holds the secrets of pi and phi in its measurements, reflecting the Earth's curve and the long cycle of the stars. Knowledge that should have needed telescopes and advanced math, tools that were not around in ancient Egypt's time. The empty king's chamber, which vibrates with frequencies that change how you feel, seems less like a tomb and more like a room tuned to the music of the universe. The Inventory and Dream Stele talk about fixing, not building, as if Khufu and Thutmose IV found holy places that they could respect but not take credit for. The underground system, with its perfectly made rooms and strange sound qualities, hints at a structure with a purpose we cannot figure out, while sealed doors found by robots stay shut, their copper pins shining like warnings from another age. These pieces put together tell a story not of Egyptian victory, but of inheritance, a gift from a lost civilization that knew its end was coming. Whether it was Atlantis, as Plato described, sinking under the waves in a disaster of floods and earthquakes, or another advanced society wiped out by the Sahara's change, the builders of Giza seem to have known that they would be forgotten. They did not carve their names or stories in hieroglyphs, because they knew that languages disappear and cultures fall apart. Instead, they put their wisdom into the universal language of math and shapes, carving numbers like pi and phi into stone that would last longer than empires. The pyramid's silence is its power, a message meant for any future, for any people who might measure its sides and find again the Earth's shape, the cycles of the stars, and the numbers that hold the universe together. Think of a world about to end. Rains stop coming, seas are rising, and societies are breaking apart under the stress of change. The builders, who are masters of star watching and engineering, create a monument to survive the storm, not to make themselves famous, but to save knowledge for those who come later. They line it up with the stars, knowing that Orion's belt would come back in its cycle, a cosmic clock ticking through thousands of years. They tune its rooms to vibrate, maybe to store information in sound waves or to guide future explorers through different states of mind. The Sphinx, part lion and part god, looks at the sunrise on the first day of spring, marking the start of a new time. Its water marks a record of the flood that almost destroyed their world. This is not a tomb for a king, but a library for all people, a place where the shape of memory lasts even when memory itself is gone. The conspiracy of secrecy that we have found makes sense with this idea. The Egyptian authorities, scholars, and world organizations protect Giza not just for tourists or to keep it safe, but because its truth is a threat to our delicate idea of progress. If the pyramid is a time capsule from a lost civilization, it means that advanced knowledge has come and gone before, that our own world might not be the best, but just a short moment in time. The burned Coptic scroll that described stone beacons from before language was silenced to stop this from being revealed. The sealed doors, the ignored radar scans, the stopped explorations, they all protect a story that keeps us from seeing our repeating past. Even the wild idea of alien help fits here. If beings from the stars built or helped build Giza, the pyramid becomes a cosmic library, a message from far away, waiting for us to grow enough to understand it. But the pyramid's real power is in its patience. It does not ask for belief or worship. It just stands there, its stones facing the weather, its codes waiting to be measured again by a future civilization coming out of ruins. Perhaps after our own world falls, the site will offer a plan. The number pi to rebuild circles, phi for beauty and design, the Earth's measurements to map the planet, the alignments to Orion to remind them of the stars' endless dance. The vibrating rooms will teach them to listen to the hum of the universe. This is the shape that memory forgot, a form so lasting it outlives forgetting. A monument built not to remember the past, but to make sure the future remembers how to start over. As we finish this journey, let the heaviness of Giza's mystery settle on you like the desert night. The Great Pyramid and Sphinx are more than just stones. They are a question, a challenge, a gift. They ask us to look beyond the stories we have been told, to question the silence, to measure the truths hidden right in front of us. Whether they were built by a lost human civilization, guided by visitors from other planets, or born from the last breath of Atlantis, Giza stands as a storage place for what is most important. The knowledge that connects us to the universe, the constants that are left when everything else is gone.